Hello and welcome to And the Runner-Up Is. This week on the show, we're talking the 2007 Best Actress race at the Academy Awards, where Marion Cotillard won for her performance in La Vie en Rose. But why did she beat fellow nominees Cate Blanchett, Julie Christie, Laura Linney, and Elliot Page? We'll explore all this and more today on And the Runner-Up Is. Hello and welcome back to And the Runner-Up Is. I'm your host, Kevin Jacobson, here to talk about the 80th year of Best Actress at the Oscars, which covered the films of 2007. We'll be discussing how Marion Cotillard won, why the losers lost, and who we think was the runner-up of this Best Actress race. And my guest today is joining the show for the very first time. She is the co-host of the Diva Dailies podcast, creator of the In My Humble Opinion YouTube channel, and self-proclaimed recent Cate Blanchett and Nicole Kidman completionist. Let's celebrate that. Welcome to the show, Steffi Acain.
Hello, Kevin. Hello, listeners. Thank you so much for having me. There are angels in the city, as one Marion Cotillard would say.
It's true. And thank you, life. Thank you, love, for that.
Yes, of course. We can't forget that part.
Yes. So happy to have you on for a very exciting, I think, Best Actress race. One where it wasn't a foregone conclusion who would win at the end. So that's always nice.
Yeah.
But before we talk 2007, let's get to know you a little and talk Best Actress as a category. So my first question, what is your favorite Best Actress win of all time?
Okay, well, Kevin, I came with a bit of a list. It's not a long list, but it's a little bit of a list, and I will go quick. Quick. Okay, so I'm going to say right now I have, because this could easily change, over time, but right now I have Barbra Streisand, 1968, for Funny Girl. Because,
yes,
hello, it's
obviously.
Barbara, obviously. Yep. And I also just loved how when she won, she integrated her Hello Gorgeous line from the movie. Mm-hmm. Smart. 10-10, no notes. Yes, yep. Of course. And then I also have 1987 Cher, Moonstruck.
Another icon, yes.
Iconic. I can't believe, did you see a couple weeks ago, I think it was Seth Meyers and Amy Poehler, they were talking about how they really love Moonstruck, but they don't believe in the chemistry between Cher and Nicolas Cage. I'm just how do you like that movie, but you don't buy into their unexpected chemistry? I
saw that as well, and I was upset because I love Seth, I love Amy, but they are wrong on this one.
Yeah, we're clearing up facts here. And then I have 2000 Julia Roberts, Erin Brockovich.
Mm-hmm.
Because I feel for me, growing up, if you asked me who is a movie star, Julia Roberts was probably the person that I thought of first. So
same. Yeah.
I would say her. And then, of course, 2013 Cate Blanchett. I have to do that. Blue Jasmine. She's my favorite, even though I know we all have very conflicting thoughts about that movie because of who directed it. But when I think of Blue Jasmine, I think of Kate and Sally Hawkins. So there we go.
Agreed. Mm-hmm.
And then 2010, Natalie Portman for Black Swan, because I think that's probably my truest answer, because that was the first race that I felt really emotionally invested in. I was following in real time, and I remember I kind of manipulated my dance team in high school to go watch that movie on the basis that it was a dance movie, but I personally knew it was way more than a dance movie. So when we got out of that movie, they were like, "Are you okay?" And I was like, "I'm great. Natalie Portman's gonna win an Oscar." So yeah, Black Swan.
That's so funny. Yeah, it's not exactly a step-up movie, necessarily.
No, they probably thought it was, and I think they were watching trailers before we went to go watch the movie, and they were like, "Are you sure this is a dance movie?" I was like, "Yes, she's doing.
Technically,
look at her."
Yeah. I mean, look at her dancing. Yeah.
I know. Little did they know.
And doing many other things besides dancing.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, what an incredible nominee list you've provided there of 5. I always love a 5. But yeah, I'm so excited to talk Natalie Portman. That is someone who strangely doesn't get talked about enough when it comes to great Best Actress wins, at least on
you're
this
like
show.
so
when people mention
close.
this. I am very close.
You're very close to that.
That is a very, very excellent year overall. Not just Natalie, but Annette Bening and Jennifer Lawrence kind of emerging, and Michelle Williams and Nicole Kidman in Rabbit Hole. Like, it's a really fantastic lineup.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, love that. Very good.
Mm-hmm.
My other question for you, though, we love our winners, but we have many losses in this category that break our hearts. At least for me. I don't want to speak for you quite yet, but what would you say is your most heartbreaking loss in this category?
Okay, I'm going to go I have a list too. So here we go.
Great.
I'll go fast like I did just now. Okay, I'm going to go in reverse though and start with my true blue answer, experiencing the heartbreak in real time. This is a bit of it's not problematic, but this is how I felt at the time. And it was 2011 Viola Davis, The Help.
Yeah, good one.
I'm just honoring the way I felt in real time because I remember watching the SAG Awards that year and it just felt like everyone wanted Viola to win. And I really wanted Viola to win. And then she won the SAG and she gave this amazing speech like she always does. And this is yet another time when I felt like SAG was leading me down a certain path. And then we get to the Oscars. And
they'll do that to you.
I know. They did it just this year with Lily Gladstone.
Yep.
Oh,
yes,
God.
They did.
I know. And then I
and
remember
of course
being
they did it to my beloved Glenn Close.
Oh, of course. Of course.
That's tough.
Never trust
Been
SAG.
there before. Nope. Those actors.
I know.
What do they know?
That's the main takeaway. But I mean, I feel like though, in hindsight, it's better that she didn't win because
yeah, and I think she would agree.
Yeah, especially after
said.
that profile. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that just mainly stems from me wanting Viola Davis to win a Best Actress award, which hopefully she can do. But
could still happen. Yeah,
it could still happen. She has time. But yeah, that's my true blue answer. But then retrospective losses, I'll just say Celia Johnson, 1946, Brief Encounter, 1974, Jenna Rollins, A Woman Under the Influence. I mean, Essential Texts.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then I'll say 93, Angela Bassett, What's Love Got to Do with It. I think, honestly, one of the better music biopics.
Yeah. And we will be talking about one today. That is maybe not as great.
Yeah.
But.
Exactly. And then I'll just quickly blanket statement say anytime a Todd Haynes Best Actress has been nominated and they lose, I'm just ugh, no. Oh my God.
I know.
And that includes the egregious snubs of May, December this past season too.
Amen. Yeah. Well, you have come to the right place because, all of those losses I have said should have won in those particular years. We'll see how I feel about Viola Davis, also coming very soon for The Help. But very, very hard to argue with any of those. Excellent picks. I think those are some of the best Actress nominees, period, that have ever been nominated in 96 years. So it's a crime that, none of them could have come out in a easier year for them to win. I'll say that.
Yeah.
Well, let's jump right into it. The 80th Academy Awards Best Actress nominees were Cate Blanchett in Elizabeth the Golden Age, Julie Christie in Away From Her, Marion Cotillard in La Vie en Rose, Laura Linney in The Savages, and Elliot Page in Juno, with the winner being Marion Cotillard. So before we break down these performances, just curious if you had overall thoughts from watching this lineup.
Okay, so I was around 14 years old during this Oscar season. And I feel like growing up until around the 2010s is when I personally started becoming more invested. But the Oscars were always in my house because my dad is a huge movie fan. He's a huge Oscars fan. So it'll just be playing in the house. So I may have actually watched this one live. But what I do remember is Diablo Cody wearing the leopard dress. Like that
Oh,
is
yes.
very
Iconic.
ingrained in me. But yeah, I mean, overall thoughts about this lineup, I will say 4 of the 5 were first time watches for me, which was
Okay.
fun.
Yeah.
And I generally like this lineup too. I wouldn't say that this is like my favorite of the decade, but it's
No.
fairly
Yeah.
solid. And I think you have a really interesting variety of movies where you have a sequel in Elizabeth the Golden Age, you have the international film from France with Levine Rose, and then there's 3 indies which feels like very of the time, like of
Yeah.
like the mid 2000s, and then one of which in Juno is like a huge pop culture juggernaut, which I'm sure we're going to
Mm-hmm.
be talking about. And then, I mean, like 2 of the performances are written and directed by women, which is exciting.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
then, in terms of the nominees, like the actual actresses and actor themselves, like you have Cate Blanchett, who by this point clearly became an Oscar favorite, and then Marion Cotillard and Elliot Page, their first time nominees, and Laura Linney manages to sneak in there somehow. And then you got Julie Christie, who's the classic, reverential nominee. So yeah, I'm really excited about these movies, these
Yeah.
performances. But what I will say is I feel like when most people look back on this year, they obviously remember like an all-time performance in
Yeah.
Marion Cotillard. But then they also talk about Cate Blanchett's iconic reactions to her Oscar clip
Of course.
and to Marion Cotillard winning, which I'm
Mhm.
sure I saw that you got some questions about that. So
Multiple. Yeah.
yes.
People are fired up to have us
Yeah.
talk about that. Yeah, I agree. I think this is a pretty fun lineup. I think sort of underrated overall. I think people do look back on the race as being 2 main contenders,
Mhm.
and I'm not disputing that is what ultimately it came down to, those 2 for the win, but like even those outside of that I think are really, really good,
Yeah.
starting at the top with Marion, having this incredible breakthrough moment and like this total Cinderella kind of experience at the Oscars.
Right.
You have the legendary Julie Christie coming back with a very, very vulnerable performance, I think, in older age. Cate Blanchett getting in for a sequel to a film that she broke through with like all those years ago. That's very, very rare.
Right.
I don't think that has happened since or before that in Best Actress.
Yeah, I
So
don't think so
that's
either.
very exciting.
Mhm.
Laura Linney, like you said, sort of coming out of nowhere with this nomination, despite not getting in any of the major precursors. Go Laura Linney.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, Elliot Page, speaking of breaking through, like a total breakout moment, huge, huge indie hit. So really, really enjoyed this group a lot. It's actually one of the first races that I directly remember being really invested in. And
Oh, really?
and feeling like it wasn't really like a foregone conclusion who was going to win, because like we've had like these sweeps with Helen Mirren and Reese Witherspoon and even like Hilary Swank everyone thought was going to win. So it's just like now we finally have kind of an interesting race going on. So
Right.
excited to revisit these with you. Shall we get into it?
Yeah. Let's go.
All right. Well, we're starting with a very fun one here. Cate Blanchett in Elizabeth the Golden Age. All right. So this is a big year for Cate Blanchett, where she is joining a rare group of actors to get 2 Oscar nominations in the same year in lead and supporting. So she's bringing her total of 3 nominations up to 5, because she is also nominated supporting actress for playing a version of Bob Dylan in I'm Not There. But surprisingly enough, this is only her second lead nomination for Elizabeth the Golden Age, her first being for Elizabeth. So as of 2007, her only times being nominated in Best Actress are for playing Queen Elizabeth I, and that is it, which is just so funny to look back on. But anyway, just to kind of update people on where she's gone in her career since we last covered her, like almost a decade ago. It's a little bit up and down in terms of projects, but the ones that do hit really, really hit. She's in all 3 Lord of the Rings movies as Galadriel, which is a obviously big box office smash for her in the mainstream. Meanwhile, she is making a lot of movies that do decently but don't really break out, like The Gift and The Shipping News, Bandits, Charlotte Gray, Veronica Guerin, The Missing. So it's like she's kind of being tested as this new star, but I think she's served far better as like the thespian actress rather than the generic movie star, I guess you could say.
Right.
And so she gets a supporting actress nomination for playing Katharine Hepburn in The Aviator in 2004, and she wins her first Oscar for that. Kind of a divisive performance, but I enjoy it. Fun to see someone winning an Oscar for playing an Oscar winner. But I think she sort of starts to hit her stride in the mid-2000s. So in 2006, she has a very prominent role in Babel, as well as Notes on a Scandal, getting her third nomination for the latter. Great performance alongside Judi Dench there. So then in 2007, she's got lots of great buzz for both I'm Not There and Elizabeth the Golden Age. Elizabeth the Golden Age, very much in the same mold as Elizabeth, except kind of cranked up even more with the theatrics and the perhaps historical inaccuracies. So she is playing Elizabeth during the latter part of her reign as Queen of England, as she wards off more attempts to overthrow her by the Spaniards. She's also facing pressure to get married and bear a child, or else after she dies, she'll have to pass the throne on to her cousin, Mary Queen of Scots, who is Catholic, and there's this religious war going on between the Catholics and the Protestants. So Elizabeth meets this English explorer, Sir Walter Raleigh, played by Clive Owen, who she takes a liking to, but he's definitely more interested in her ward, Bess, Abby Cornish, which is a whole mess. So it's more of Elizabeth dealing with conflict in her personal life and her life as a queen. So, Steffi, as we kind of established in the beginning, I know Cate Blanchett is one of your faves. So tell me your relationship with her as an actress and her performance in this Elizabeth sequel.
Well, I mean, I love Cate. Like we've kept saying, she's my favorite actress. And I think out of everyone we're talking about today, she's probably the one I feel the most comfortable talking about, because I've literally seen like nearly everything she's been in, including like all of those questionably flop projects that you mentioned earlier. I sat through all of that.
Wow, you were in the trenches.
I know I was there with her, but it's a journey. But yeah, I feel like Cate is someone who somehow gets like better and better over time. And, you know, like you said, in the context of your podcast, it's interesting that this is only her second time popping up in conversation, but she's going to pop up more in the 2010s and in 2020s, I'm sure. But yeah, I mean, I feel like in terms of this particular nomination, this feels like a parentheses obligatory nomination. A bit of a name check, which I hope doesn't sound offensive, but it's clear that the Academy really liked her at this point. And I do wonder if part of the reason why they nominated her for Elizabeth the Golden Age is because of residual feeling from her losing to Gwyneth Paltrow for the original Elizabeth. So they were probably like, well, of course, this is good because the first one was really good. So how can the second one not be really good? And I'm pretty sure it's like similar team that came back from the first to the second. But unfortunately, that was not the case, because I feel like as a whole, Elizabeth the Golden Age is kind of a mess.
Yeah, you could say that.
Yeah, because I just feel like I'll say like the first, maybe this is me being generous, but like the first 30 to 45-ish minutes, I'm like, oh, this isn't like bad. I'm just like, okay, I'm entertained. But
having fun.
I'm having fun. Like Kate's having fun. I'm having fun. But then as the movie keeps going, I'm like, oh no. it's pretty rough to sit through. I mean, in the words of Aretha, this movie is basically like gowns, beautiful gowns. Like quite literally, because of one
Oscar
best costume design. I know it's Elizabeth the Golden Age is an Oscar-winning movie, like technically.
Yeah,
I know.
Think of all the movies that aren't. And this one is.
I can't. Like that will just make me like really anxious and sad. But yeah, I mean, like visually, the movie is really pretty to look at, but in terms of story, it is kind of a mess, because like once you get past like maybe the 30 to 40-ish minute mark, you're like, why does this exist? was this necessary? And also just the way that they shot this movie is so strange, because whenever they're in that specific room, like the circular room where she sits and she makes them learn the Volta, it's like Shekhar Kapoor is like so obsessed with moving the camera around and around and around, and I feel like I'm getting like semi-motion sickness while watching those sequences. But yeah, there's just a lot going on narratively.
Yeah.
And then somehow when you get to the very end, it ends up not really being about anything. And Elizabeth as a character doesn't really have a clear arc in comparison to the first movie, because you're just like, you just basically ended up where you started. Like, essentially the whole narrative of the film is her tackling different pieces of like self-doubt. Like, she's doubting herself in like so many different ways. Like, she's daunted by like her responsibilities of being a queen, and then she's lonely and she's aging and she doesn't know if she can like trust certain people or if people really love her for being the queen. And then she's experiencing like major FOMO because, you know, Sir Walter Raleigh's like out there living his best life, being an adventurer, and then she can't do that because she has to be queen. And then you get to the end, and then she's just giving us a monologue, breaking fourth wall, speaking to us, which is so strange because she never did that in the first movie. Where she basically like tells us her arc is like, I am called the Virgin. I like wrote it down here, but she says like, I am called the Virgin Queen. Unmarried, I have no master. Childless, I am mother to my people. God give me strength to bear this mighty freedom. I am your queen. I am myself. And it's like, oh my God, it took a 2-hour movie to figure all of that out. I can't, but I mean,
which
Kate
I kind of feel like we got
fun.
that point at the end of the first Elizabeth.
Yeah, so I'm just like, what were we trying to accomplish here? So yeah, that's kind of how
She's
I feel
a survivor.
about this movie.
I don't know. Yeah.
I know.
Yeah. I mean, I love Cate Blanchett. She is an incredible actress, and this is one of her most iconic roles. But this is a very silly movie. I think for all of the fun sort of trashiness of the first Elizabeth film, plus having that great arc of Elizabeth going from young and inexperienced to someone who is growing up and coming into her own, there is like that underlying dramatic arc that does provide enough foundation, I think, for the rest of the film to sort of indulge in the sort of tawdriness and the whole like not your mama's period piece type of energy.
Right.
This, it's sort of like, okay, we've done all that setup with Elizabeth. Now we're just going to give you more trashiness without really telling like a coherent story to support it. So when I watch it, I'm like, you know, that was fun. It was campy, but I don't walk away feeling any more enlightened by like who Elizabeth was than I did from the first film. And I don't think Kate is actually given a whole lot of opportunity to explore anything new, I guess. Yeah. You know, like it's still a decent performance, but I think the film itself is what really fails her, I think, in terms of like really getting into the psychology of Elizabeth and having her go on some kind of journey, you know, that's not just a repeat of the first one of like, hey, I'm falling for a guy and I'm falling out of love with the guy and I'm dealing with assassination attempts again and learning to be the Virgin Queen again and accepting that role. It's just like, it's so similar to me that like, I don't really understand why they wanted to revisit this and like go further. I mean, she does of course have the iconic line, which we will get to, and that has always stood out, just the power in her voice in that one scene. But yeah, I wouldn't rate this as anywhere near her best work by any means.
Yeah.
So it's tough.
Same. I think I said this before, but like I think this is her weakest nomination that she has, including everything from Elizabeth to Tar. I think this is like by far the weakest, probably the one like if you had to give back, you give this one back.
I think so. And I think maybe she would be okay with that. I don't know. I don't know if she's ever fully talked about it other than what we've seen in the reaction to her Oscar clip. But she seems a little like,
Yeah.
Plus she has said that she voted for Marion Cotillard this year.
Yeah. I mean, I want to believe her.
Yeah, I do.
I want to believe that she has taste.
Yes, and she was clearly so elated when Marion won. But
Yeah.
yes, I do want to note that I like when she busts out the German at one point when she is talking to the Archduke of Austria or whoever, and he's kind of like struggling with his English, and she just kind of alleviates the tension there. Love whenever Cate Blanchett can bust out German out of nowhere, like in Tar.
Yeah.
But yeah, you see her just like busting it out, like how she sort of loves showing off in a way of being like, oh, I'm so cultured and I could say all these things in another language. And to me, there is that underlying sort of like, she doesn't have a lot of experience like outside in the real world. And so like the power she gets is just from like kind of dazzling people with her words or her behavior and things like that. And she does have that jealousy, like you said, about, Sir Walter Raleigh going off to all these different lands. And so there is like a little bit of that insecurity, I think, that is sort of underlying some of it. Yeah. I don't know how much it's fully commented on by the film itself or if I'm just projecting it, but that is what I get from the performance, at least.
Yeah, I think, I could definitely see that too. I will say, I think in comparison to the first movie, I think she's funnier in Elizabeth the Golden Age compared to the first one. Like, they give her, well, maybe I don't know if they necessarily give her that, but like she finds moments to make really fun. Like, I mean, I feel like all of her interactions with Geoffrey Rush, she is really, really sassy to him in this movie. Like, she slaps him. Yeah, she's kind of mean, actually.
Yeah. Even though he's like her most trusted confidant in the first one.
Yeah, like she has this shady line where she's like, perhaps we should all retire. And she like gives him a look. And I was like, that's kind of
right.
That was really rude. But I was like really enjoying that because it was entertaining to watch.
Yeah. I think we should definitely talk about the scene that everyone loves to talk about with this movie, where she finds out about the plan from Spain to overthrow her reign. And I mean, I'm not going to do it justice by any means, but of course she says, I too can command the wind, sir. I have a hurricane in me that could strip Spain bare if you dare to try me. And it's just a lot. Like, it's a big, big moment. I don't know if it's good or bad or a secret third thing, but I love just like the guttural voice she uses, especially towards the end of that line, to show that she is like just as powerful and dominant as any man, and she will be respected as the queen. Yes. But I do understand, like, out of context, when you look at that scene, it's like, whoa.
It's a lot. But I was here for it. Like, I mean, I love when actresses go big. So, I mean, I was there for that. Yeah, do it. And I feel like also when you watch the trailer for Elizabeth the Golden Age, like, they really capitalized on that moment too. And like, in general, everyone capitalized on that moment. Like, if you watch the BAFTAs that year or you watch the SAG Awards, everyone had different clips except for Cate Blanchett. It was always that singular clip. So
practically made to be shown in an Oscar clip.
Yeah.
So for better or for worse.
Yeah.
But I think just as a film, it really does start to feel like a retread, like, to your point, like past the 40-minute mark of being like, hey, this is me struggling with my personal life. Clive Owen is basically replacing Joseph Fiennes and growing out of those feelings and learning it's my destiny to like be the Virgin Queen. Don't need a man, except this time it just feels soapier and hammier, and also not really anywhere near as fresh as the sort of Star is Born quality of the first film. And I also think just the relationships don't really hit as hard, or there's not enough sort of invested for the audience.
I thought the implementation of her favorite lady in waiting was just really interesting. I mean, because I don't know, we didn't really see a dynamic quite like that in the first movie, and maybe they're trying something new in the second movie. But I don't know. This like might be me projecting because this is like post like me now having seen her in movies like Carol and Tar, but I'm just like, what, you should have just been really best buds with Abby Cornish's character,
Yeah.
Bess. Like I
Mhm.
feel like this Elizabeth in Elizabeth the Golden Age was like giving me like Tashi Duncan vibes.
Wow. I was not expecting that comparison,
Because I
but
feel
I
like
love it.
she was just like trying to orchestrate this relationship between
True.
Bess and Sir Walter Raleigh. And
Mhm.
then maybe because of the way in some scenes they were shot, like when it's the three of them sitting and she's asking
Yeah.
Bess, like, do you want to go to sea with Sir Walter Raleigh? And then she teaches them the Volta. It's just, I don't know, it's giving challengers energy.
Sure. Yeah.
You're like, yeah, that's an
interesting
interpretation.
perspective. No, I love that. Because it's giving more credit than I would have given the movie.
Well, I mean, I think it makes it more interesting. So maybe
Yeah.
if I'm
No,
viewing
it's
it through
true.
that lens.
Yeah. No, I like that.
Yeah.
And I do like when we do see how her feelings on orchestrating that start to change, and she does
I
start to
know.
feel those little pains of loneliness there.
Right.
So I always like when we give Kate the opportunity to actually carry a scene without having to shout, you know,
Mhm. Yeah.
and just
I
kind of
agree.
process things on her face, because we don't get that a lot in the film, quite honestly.
Oh, yeah,
But
for sure.
yeah, I think for me, I just get to a certain point when watching it where it's like, none of this plot really matters. And like, it's all about seeing these great actors sort of going at each other and Kate commanding the wind and just like having it be a good night of theater, I guess, rather than something with like true, like realistic emotion necessarily. Like, it is very heightened and stylized. And I feel like it just eventually starts to whip through so much plot to the extent that like I don't really connect much to what's happening. Like, Samantha Morton is here as Mary Queen of Scots, who I think is totally wasted. And when like Elizabeth is kind of horrified to learn that Mary was involved in this plot to assassinate her, I don't really feel like much devastation there, which I think it's mostly in the script. But
Yeah.
I don't know, like that whole inclusion just feels like its own separate movie to me.
Yeah, it feels
than
like this
everything
movie
else.
tries to do like so many things.
Yeah,
And then there's like no connective tissue between like one element to the next. And then when you just
Right.
have all of it happening at once, and then you get to the end, it doesn't even feel like there was any real resolution. It's just like, well, things happened, and now I'm standing
Things did
here
happen.
on top of
Yeah.
a map with my arms open and palms up. So
Yes.
yeah.
And she did that.
Yeah, she did do that.
I do like her sort of like Braveheart moment on the horse too. Like when she is kind of starting to lead them into war, rallying the troops.
That
And,
horse just like was not cooperating that day.
I love an uncooperative animal on screen.
Oh my gosh. And you
Always
could like
fun.
see her like struggling, like trying to like get it
Yeah.
back on track. It's so awkward.
Yeah.
But she tried.
She tried. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I'm just like, this should sort of be like a galvanizing sort of moment of her defending like her land and leading her nation and showing why she's such a powerful leader. But then like, I don't really feel anything.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's a me thing or a movie thing or both, but I just wish that I could feel the heightened emotions
Right.
that the film is trying to get me to feel.
Yeah.
But it's just that there's so much being thrown at the wall.
Right.
Like
Yeah.
the full pasta dinner has been thrown at the wall, and I'm just like, okay, so what now?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would agree. It just feels like they're covering that because that's the period of history that they're in. So of course they
Right.
need to cover that.
Yeah, and then when it turns into like this sort of Pirates of the Caribbean battle sequence at the end, I'm like, this is an entirely different movie, and it just like feels very out of place. It feels a little bit like a studio note maybe to like make sure they include some big action scene. But
Yeah, and then I don't
do
understand like
think
what she's doing in that sequence either. Because she's just
she's
kind of
commanding
like
the wind.
well, yeah, I guess she's like standing by the edge of a hill and like just
Yeah.
staring off into the distance. But
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. High camp, high comedy.
Yeah. I feel like
So-
if you like go into Elizabeth the Golden Age and you just like know not to take it seriously, I think it's like
You'll
more
have a much better
watchable.
time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. So like it is a fun performance to watch. I don't think it needed an Oscar nomination, but good for you, Kate.
Yeah.
You made history.
I
you
know. And I love
So,
that she's like entering that exclusive club of being nominated like in the same year, Best Supporting Actress and Best Actress. So even though it is for
even though she lost both.
Yeah. You made it into the
tough.
club. Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't really have too much else here unless you had anything you wanted to add.
Well, I mean, while I was, doing some research, I did hear some interviews of her mentioning Shekhar Kapoor wanting to do a third.
Oh, dear.
I don't know if that's going to happen, but...
Okay.
Yeah.
Well.
It was something about, like, he was interested in the last, like, several hours of Queen Elizabeth's life, and, like, Shekhar Kapoor told Cate Blanchett a story of how Elizabeth, like, stood at a window, like, for 16 hours and then just went to bed and died. And he's interested in those 16 hours. And then she was like, it's going to be a very still movie.
So an experimental film.
Yeah.
Got it.
Oh my gosh.
Hey, that sounds like an interesting perspective. I would like to see that because, we just said there's so much plot in this. I think we could really drill down on something with this third one if that's what we're doing.
Yeah, maybe they need some like stillness now. So
yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Okay, interesting. Well, let's move on to our next nominee, Miss Julie Christie in Away From Her. This is a tough one. So Julie Christie getting her 4th Oscar nomination, her latest nomination. And because she's more or less retired now, it may well be her last. But the last time we talked about Julie was for Afterglow in 1997. Not a fan of that movie. She is solid in it, but that was not a great viewing experience. So anyway, now she is kind of in this second wind period of her career. She starts appearing in some more mainstream films again, including a very brief role in Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, and bigger roles in Troy and Finding Neverland. All of this is in 2004. She gets a BAFTA nomination for Finding Neverland. But there's also this kind of part of Julie that isn't all that interested in acting anymore, which is where Away From Her comes in. And she actually only agreed to do this film because Sarah Polley, the writer-director, was her friend. And apparently it took several months of convincing for Julie to do the film because she just had that lack of interest at this point in her career. But interesting to go from mostly ambivalence to then getting dozens of awards and nominations for this performance. Just a kind of wild trajectory. But Away From Her is an indie drama about this older Canadian couple, Grant and Fiona, played by Gordon Pinsent and Julie Christie, who have been together for more than 40 years, but now they are both realizing that Fiona is exhibiting symptoms of Alzheimer's, including forgetting where things are supposed to go, forgetting where she's going, forgetting certain words. And she agrees to go to a nursing home, even though she is still somewhat young compared to the other residents. But while she's there, she develops a relationship of sorts with another resident, Aubrey, which Grant notices from afar, and Fiona forgets who Grant is, that he's her husband. She only really sees him as this sort of friend, if not like an annoyance at certain points as she's taking on this new relationship. And the film is largely about Grant sort of accepting that Fiona is drifting away from him and sort of trying to also give her that happiness, even if it hurts him personally. So this is a tough watch. Curious for your thoughts on Julie Christie overall and her performance in Away From Her.
Yeah, this is a very different movie from Elizabeth the Golden Age, so quite
decidedly more understated. Yeah.
Yes, quite the emotional whiplash. I actually had not seen a Julie Christie movie ever prior to this, so this was my first. Damn. Yeah, this was my first. Okay. But then after I watched this movie, I went back and watched all of her previous Oscar-nominated performances, and I'll agree with you that Afterglow is terrible. I don't know how that movie got nominated. That movie was really terrible. I actually watched it when I was at sitting at a gate in the airport, like before we were about to board, and then our flight got canceled. And I found it on Tubi, and I was like, "Oh, great! This is on Tubi for free. I could watch it." And then I was like, "Oh, now I know why it's on Tubi."
Yeah. Fair.
Yeah, it was pretty rough.
So many choices in that movie. So many choices.
Yikes. But I mean, like, in terms of Away from Her, a much better movie.
Yeah.
I'm happy that at least, like, if this does end up being her last, this is a really, really good movie. I think it's like between this and Darling are like fighting for number one for me. But in terms of the movie, though, I cannot believe that Sarah Polley wrote and directed this at like, what, 27, 28, or 27 or 28 years old. That's insane. Because this movie
is her debut.
Yeah, and this is her debut too.
Yeah.
Like, this movie, I just feel like is so mature. And in terms of like subject matter, because it's dealing with Alzheimer's and how does one take care of their partner who is dealing with Alzheimer's. So that's a really heavy subject. And then on top of that, like, she's dealing with actors who are like much older than her, two of which that are like Oscar winners in Olympia Dukakis and Julie Christie. So I think she just does a really fabulous job handling the subject matter and with the screenplay and directing the film. But yeah, I'm really, really happy that I watched this, though, because I think it's a hidden gem for sure.
Yeah, I agree. I think more people should watch this. This feels like one of those like Criterion Collection type of like saves this movie and gives it a new audience. So anyway, I feel like this is also a bit of a divisive performance. Not that people don't like it necessarily, but I feel like when people talk about this performance, it's either people thinking she should have won and that she's heartbreaking, or people are a little underwhelmed.
Oh, and that she's like not doing enough.
Right. And I sort of get both sides there. Yeah. Personally, I find myself very moved by this performance. I don't know about you, but it's...
I would agree. I will say, like, I think because I this is the one that like I managed to watch twice because I felt like after the first time I watched it, like I liked it, but I felt like it was kind of hard for me to like pinpoint specifically like her performance. Because I think the thing with movies, and you're specifically looking at performances where that person is dealing with Alzheimer's and dementia, is like it can be a bit difficult to track where their character is going and like what the trajectory and arc is. And I think what's really smart about this particular script, because you're not in the headspace of the person dealing with Alzheimer's and dementia, like the father with Anthony Hopkins, where like you're experiencing that story through his mind. So it's very clear like what's going, well, it's not very clear, but like you understand like why he's feeling the way he's feeling. Right. I think what's really smart about this screenplay is like the first like 40-ish minutes or so are them establishing who Fiona, Julie Christie's character, who she is before, you know, like it really, really, really starts to take a turn. So I think when I was able to like reframe it and like really take that in, my second time of watching this movie, that's when I was like, oh, okay, I get it. And it clicks. And then you also just like start to notice smaller details that you might have not really noticed the first time. Like looking at her hair, like her hair is so fabulous in this movie. Gorgeous. Like, you know, that still when you like look up away from her and it's like her kind of like peeking out the window.
Looking out the window.
Yeah, looking out the window. The hair looks so good. But then like what I noticed the second time is like you can really tell the trajectory of her character and like where she kind of is mentally by kind of the state of her hair. Because once she's in the like the care facility and then she really no longer remembers who her husband is like the hair is suddenly like more and more unkempt as the story keeps going. But I just feel like you don't really pick up on those. Well, I mean, maybe some people do, but I think you appreciate the performance more, like, on multiple viewings. But then maybe, like, this was the case with some Academy voters is, like, they didn't want to watch this movie again because it is such a difficult subject matter to engage with, so.
No, that's a very good point. And I think, to that point, when I first watched this around this time, I don't, you know, as a 18-year-old punk kid, like I don't know if I fully appreciated the sensitivity here and all the details within this. I thought this was just like, oh, a very nice drama, but I don't think I really connected to it. And also now having gone through multiple grandparents dealing with Alzheimer's, it's like, you really feel how this really is in touch with that very difficult experience from both ends, I think.
Right.
You know, especially from someone who is seeing it, in the case where, like, this movie is told from the perspective mostly of Grant. And so that is another thing that sort of can make it tough to fully connect with Julie Christie for some people, I think, is that it is so within his framework. And even he is struggling to really understand, like, her true feelings at certain times. So it is very tricky in that way, which I personally enjoy as a movie watcher, is something that doesn't hold your hand necessarily.
Totally.
So
yeah, I would agree. I would agree too, because I feel like his character is kind of, he's like our proxy, and the way we feel about her character is through him. So I think Gregory Pinsent does such a great job in this movie, and especially like in the second half when you really don't see Julie Christie as much, and every time he does see her, it's like you don't really even know like where in her Alzheimer's she is, like where in the timeline she thinks their relationship is at. So a lot of the way that we're like viewing that character is through him. And I just think he does such a great job. Yeah,
I think he deserved a lot of more of those nominations alongside her, which I don't really understand why he didn't get those. But yeah, I think just to bring it back to Julie, I think it does help in my connecting to it now, having gone through all her Oscar nominations and even seeing her other performances like Don't Look Now, just like knowing Julie Christie so much more at this point and seeing the evolution from like, you know, the ingenue of Darling to the more respected actress in the 70s with like McCabe and Mrs. Miller, and then seeing her at that more mature age with Afterglow even, to then seeing her embracing kind of her older age in away from her. Like it's actually a similar kind of trajectory, which I talked about with like Joanne Woodward and her 4 nominations that were spread out over like 30, 40 years or so. So it was like I was just like checking in with this actress at like various stages of her life, which is just a really fascinating little experiment, I think. But yeah, I think this performance has a lot of Julie Christie trademarks, especially her kind of like aloof coldness at times.
Yeah.
Where you can't fully read her, which I think is fascinating. That's what makes her interesting. Plus that like inherent sort of sexiness I think she does still have, like especially in that first 40 minutes before she goes to the nursing home. Like she is very sexy, you know?
Right.
And she has obviously really matured and sort of refined her craft here. And even though I do think this is a case where like maybe her co-star is the true lead of the film, I do think she is still so captivating to watch. I think it's very delicate what's asked of her, and I do find her so lived in as Fiona that like I get why some people wouldn't be as impressed because of how quiet the performance is, but I think that is what I really respond to, is this sort of like, especially the acceptance that she gets to at a certain point of what's happening to her.
Oh my gosh, so sad.
Like realizing she can't really reverse this, and it's just like she's just letting nature play itself out.
Right.
And I don't know, there's just like this quiet strength, I think, and a maturity, and you also feel that love between them in the beginning. Like you pick up on it right away that this is a very lived in relationship. Like no question that they've been together for decades, and that, you know, this love hasn't dulled necessarily, but she is starting to slip away. It's just very sad to just sort of watch her feeling a little bit trapped in her own mind. But then like having those little moments of lucidity where it's like, oh, maybe there is still something there in her, but then like it's mostly just like this haziness overall. And that is really, really difficult, I think, to communicate as an actress.
Yeah, totally. I feel like the way Sarah Polley shoots Julie Christie, like that first, there's like that scene when they're having dinner with their friends, and it's like that very slow push in, and then she can't find the words for wine, and she's like Wayne, and then they try to like kind of cover it up, and then it's her kind of like talking about, yeah, I'm like struggling to like find the words these days, and then she has this like epiphany of like, I think I'm starting to disappear, and like her her expressions like during that particular scene and like also throughout. But if you really look at Julie Christie's eyes, I think, yeah, you're totally right. She like the ask is so difficult because she has to balance moments where she's searching for the answer, but then also there's like a vacancy there. But then there'll be moments like that she is purely communicating off of her eyes alone, where you know, like, oh, she suddenly like remembers something, or like she suddenly is aware of like what's going on, and then like in a moment it's gone. That's a really difficult, you know, performance. It's a really difficult ask of someone.
Right. And I also think it's just her in communication with the screenplay, Sarah Polley's screenplay, of portraying this in a very realistic way. It's not just going to be the thing where it's like, oh, now she's slipped away and now that's it. It's not like a black and white thing. Like there are these moments of lucidity that, you know, can't be fully explained because the human mind is impossible to explain sometimes.
Yeah.
And so I think what's just really fascinating, like I said, is seeing her kind of like serene sort of attitude, that she is so accepting and she knows what's happening and she doesn't fight it, which I think we see in a lot of other Alzheimer kind of stories of being like really angry and like really trying to like revolt against it, even in like The Father, for example.
Right.
But it's actually much harder to accept. Like her husband is much harder to accept this than she is, even though she's going through it. And so, yeah, it's just a really, even like from those first 40 minutes, such a brilliant performance. And even though maybe her screen time starts to slip away over time, once she does get into the nursing home, I think when we do check in on her, it is very haunting. And it feels like she has become like a ghost in a way. Of someone who just like, she's there and Grant knows that, but like she is someone else somehow. Like the connection there is just like severed on her end.
Oh, totally. It's like when I was watching it the second time, I was kind of thinking of it as like, this is kind of like a weird way to frame this, but it's like walkie-talkies. Like they both have walkie-talkies, but like they're just like on different frequencies, where like she's picking up a different like channel, but he's getting static, and it's just like they're not connecting at all. But yeah, I would agree with you too. Like the first 40 minutes especially are like really, really good. And like you were talking about the moments of acceptance with her character, like that whole sequence when they have that conversation where she's like, Grant, it's time. In like a lot of ways, like she has to be strong for the both of them. And then when they eventually like, you know, the day comes where she has to go with Grant to the facility, and he's just like begging her the entire way, like, don't go, don't go, don't go. And then they're in her room, and then she kind of turns to him and is like, if you don't, you know, like, I want you to make love to me, and then I want you to go. Oh my gosh. It's like she's just thinking like, we have to get through this, and this is what needs to happen because it's already happening. And it's just really, really sad.
It really is. There's also one other element too that makes this so interesting, which is when they are on the drive to the nursing home and she says, there's things I wish would go away, but won't. Things we don't talk about. And is very directly implying, I think, that he cheated on her when they were younger, and he was teaching and had all these attention from, you know, younger female students. But like, she understood what was going on and didn't necessarily say anything, or at least like wasn't outwardly bothered by it. And they have this kind of like unspoken arrangement, I guess, where she just sort of put up with it, because she also says at some point, like, she didn't need his love all the time. How exhausting, you know?
Yeah.
But there is this real like sudden like bitterness underneath this very like calm, serene monologue that she is delivering to him that is almost chilling, in showing how like this is how she got by without falling apart all those years ago, but like it still bothered her to some degree, or else why is she bringing it up now, like all these years later? Like it still nags at her. But like also that time is so long ago, so it's over at this point, so it's complicated because she also knows like he loves her more than anything. It's not like he went off to be with any of those younger women, you know?
Right. Yeah.
So it's like really interesting material we get into there.
Yeah, that was like a really unexpected just like storyline in general. Like I would have never thought like, not to say that like the Alzheimer's was like a plot device for that, but it's like the Alzheimer's really does open up the marriage for what it really was. And it's this
Right.
like idea that I think the nurse talks about it with him towards the end, like this idea that like the
Hmm.
men were blissfully naive to the reality of what the marriage was, but then the women, like Julie Christie's character and Olympia Dukakis's character, and even the nurse that Gregory Pinsent's talking with towards the end, like they've always seen it for what it really was. So yeah, just a lot of
Yeah.
heavy material.
Very mature themes
I know.
for a
27.
20-something-year-old
Yeah.
Sarah Polley to be tackling.
I know. Oh my gosh.
That's why I
She's just
love
like,
her.
I'll go home.
Yeah. Yeah. But it's interesting because, like, of course, we get to this point that, like, after 30 days, he's able to visit her again. And I think it is very clever what the film does and in her performance, because it is somewhere in between, like, the lucidity and then the disease taking its course, because she seems to recognize him as, like, important somehow. And she takes him by the arm that time and like chats with him in a very like cheerful way, but it becomes clear over time that like she doesn't actually know who he is, and she thinks he's like a new resident at the facility.
Right.
But also there's like just enough doubt with how overly familiar she is with him that he thinks, oh, she might still be there. She seems to still know, but also she's talking about like her grandparents and all this stuff that he already knows. So it's a really, really good scene for her. And as he starts to observe, there is that real distanced, like distracted almost quality over time, because she's just like fully moved on. She has this whole new life with this guy, Aubrey, at the nursing home.
Oh, gosh.
And it's almost like she's starting to see Grant as like, man, you come here a lot.
Yeah.
Like, what's your deal?
You're so persistent.
Yeah. And like she's trying to be polite about it, but like is a little puzzled by like why he keeps coming back to her, which is just heartbreaking, I think.
Yeah, I would agree. There is that like interesting level of ambiguity there, because you really don't know like who she thinks he is in relation to her. And I think that's also like part of the reason why like he has that, I forget who he's talking to, but he has this whole thing where he's like, I think she's trying to get back at me.
Yeah.
Which
he thinks that she might be like faking a lot of this somehow.
Which was really interesting. So yeah. And they live such like full lives. Like I think that's what like also makes the screenplay interesting too, is because it's, you know, a lot of the like most of the main players in this movie, they're like elderly actors and actresses. Like sometimes the way we portray that age group on screen is very like two-dimensional, but here like, oh my gosh, they have such full lives. Like they're sleeping with each other, they're they're having like, I mean, it's not like, you know, risque or anything, but they're fully realized three-dimensional people that have lived very full lives, and just because they're at their old age, that doesn't mean like they no longer have problems, or you know. So
yeah, it is very fascinating in that way, and again very mature. And as that relationship grows stronger, we have Aubrey's wife, played by Olympia Dukakis, eventually moving him back home because they have like financial situation, and the way Fiona just like totally shuts down after a certain point, like there's no life in her. It's really, really shocking, I think. And there's this very moving moment, I think, where Grant is like reading these letters from Iceland, and she's moved to tears in this very vulnerable way, like, and it doesn't feel like a classic sort of movie crying scene necessarily. Like it's just a very raw, authentic sort of welling up of emotion, and just this feeling of like she's so bereft and just shrunken within herself and grieving the loss of someone that, you know, technically she just sort of met, but like feels like he's like her one and only. But also the man sitting right next to her is her husband of 40 years.
I know.
And she does not care or, you know, acknowledge him in that way at all. Until the very end.
Yeah. And even then, like when they, at the very end, when she has her whole thing of like, you never left me when you could have, you're not even quite sure, like, again, like you're not quite sure where in the relationship she is. You know what I mean? So yeah, it's complicated. It's a tough movie, and it's a lot to take and digest.
It is. It really is a lot to digest,
Yeah.
which sometimes for Oscar voters is a big ask. Yeah, but it's a really, really beautiful performance. It definitely is more from Grant's perspective, but I do think just their dynamic is so lived in, and they really play off each other so well that I think it only enhances, the other actors' work
For sure
in their scenes together.
Yeah,
So,
I would agree.
yeah, a really, really lovely performance. So glad she got this nomination and she agreed to do it, because I know it was probably difficult to convince her, but yeah, I'm glad it happened.
It was worth it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think so. Yeah. Okay, shall we move on to our next nominee?
Yeah.
A little bit lighter, but oddly enough, dealing with similar themes in a way. Laura Linney in The Savages. Okay, this is a very exciting nomination for Laura Linney, her second in lead, her third overall. Sadly, still her most recent, but I do have faith that she could come back, especially after, some of the goodwill she got from Ozark. But yeah, we last talked about Laura for her first nomination in 2000 for You Can Count on Me. Here she is 7 years later, and really coming out of relative nowhere with this nomination, having not gotten into any of the major precursors. So we'll talk a little bit more about how that happened a little later, but in between those two lead nominations, she has really emerged as one of the more highly respected actresses in all different fields: film, TV, theater. 2003 is a really good year where she's in Mystic River, which was a big Oscar player. She's in Love Actually, a holiday classic. She is in 2004 in Kinsey, gets her second nomination for that in Best Supporting Actress. So that is another significant moment for her. The following year, she's in The Squid and the Whale. Great performance there. Meanwhile, on TV, she is winning multiple Emmys. Her first for Wild Iris in 2002, another for guesting on Frasier in 2004. On Broadway, she's in The Crucible and Sight Unseen, getting Tony nominations for both of them. So just really killing it in all areas right now. And here in The Savages, she is working with Philip Seymour Hoffman, a very recent Oscar winner for Capote. And this is written and directed by Tamara Jenkins. It is a dramedy about a pair of siblings, John and Wendy Savage, played by Philip Seymour Hoffman and Laura Linney. They've moved to New York to pursue their artistic dreams in their adulthood, but they are forced to reconnect with their father, who they haven't seen in years, after they get a call about him and realize he is suffering from dementia, and they go about getting him into a nursing home. Meanwhile, both John and Wendy are dealing with personal drama, professional drama, and for Wendy, she is in an affair with a married man, which is messy, and it's mostly like kind of a character study at the end of the day about these two siblings who are just trying to figure out the right thing to do in a very difficult situation. So here we go. Laura Linney. Thoughts on Laura Linney overall and The Savages?
I really like Laura Linney. I think she's always such a reliable actress. And I haven't watched everything she's been in, but sometimes she'll pop up in movies that I just so happen to be watching. Not necessarily for her, but it's like I'm happy to see her. Like recently, like a couple months ago when I was doing my Nicole Kidman deep dive, I watched this movie called Genius. It was like directed by Michael Brandage. I think he recently directed My Policeman with Harry Styles and Emma Corrin. But I watched that for Nicole, and then Laura Linney popped up, and literally like that movie is so terrible and everyone is not good in it, but everyone guilty, Laura Linney innocent. Like I was like, at least Laura Linney's in this. So yeah, I think she's like the Allstate of actresses, honestly. Like every time she pops up, you know you're in good hands.
Oh my God, I love that.
Yeah, that should be like her tagline, make it her Twitter bio.
Yes.
But yeah, she's such a smart actress, and I think like in anything that she's in, you can really tell that she like understands the text and she understands like tone. And she's someone who she can start off the scene like really, really funny, and then it'll end in a really heartbreaking way, and it never feels jarring at all. And I think between this and You Can Count on Me, like her previous Oscar nomination, like it's really interesting how much like crossover there is between You Can Count on Me and The Savages, because both of them center adult sibling relationships and I think in You Can Count on Me, she's having an affair with the Matthew Broderick character, and then here she's having an affair as well. And I mean, I think she's a little bit more neurotic and messier in this one compared to You Can Count on Me. But yeah, I think they would make for like a really great double feature. But in terms of like this movie specifically, The Savages, I'd never heard of this movie, and I think this is like a movie that generally gets forgotten, no offense, but it's really, really good. And then also, like, when you watch it, it feels of that time where we were getting like these like American indie films like in the mid 2000s. They kind of have this like, I don't know, like this similar like atmosphere. This is Fox Searchlight, right? I think it is.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, and this is like I think Fox Searchlight, they did Little Miss Sunshine, right? So like it kind of feels like of the same vein too, like everyday people like trying to get on with life through a difficult
figure their shit out.
Yeah. So but I really, really enjoyed this one. I really, really enjoyed this one too. So
yeah, absolutely. This is, I think, such a cool nomination. I love that the Academy went out of their way and, you know, got out of lockstep with the other precursors to recognize this really, really good performance. And it's like not necessarily the kind of performance that they typically go for as like obvious Oscar bait type thing.
Yeah.
Like it's still showy to a certain extent, but you know, she's not playing a real person. It's not full of these big speeches or anything. The character she's playing is not always easy to love. So it's just like a really good performance from a very reliable actress. Mm-hmm. And so I just love that the nomination happened. And she brings so much of what we love about Laura Linney. I feel like, to your point, it really does have so much overlap with You Can Count on Me, where it's just like neurotic, kind of like perpetually on edge, and she is like slipping into this sort of aspiring playwright character with so much ease here, and like her sense of comedic timing is as on point as ever. I think she's so funny in this movie.
Oh yeah.
Like when the guy she's having an affair with comes over and he's like talking about how his wife has gone through like similar problems that she is with her cervix. Mm-hmm. And she's just like, I don't need to be hearing about your wife's cervix.
Yeah.
Like that classic sort of Laura Linney gusto.
Yes.
I just love pissed off Laura Linney. It's like one of the best things.
Right. When like she gets super exasperated and it's just like at her wit's end. It's really, really funny.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you have that like kind of deep voice she has.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's so fun.
Yeah. There's so many moments where she's just like had it. Like I think for me, one of my favorite scenes of this movie, and it like stood out immediately, like once it happened, was Big Red Pillow. Like it was so funny. Oh my gosh.
Yes. It's so good. Yeah, there's honestly so many quotes from this, and I'm so glad that this, like Away From Her, got a screenplay nomination.
Yeah.
Because this is so well written. So many of her lines, like even when she is like calling her brother up before they go to Arizona, and she's just like, Dad is writing on the wall with his shit.
Yeah.
Like, and he's just like, what? Like it's like it's late. There's no filter. But yeah, this is one where I also, like Away From Her, really do feel the easy like comfort between the two characters at the center here. Like you can really tell that they grew up together and they have such similar sensibilities as like these New York artist types, liberal, you know, a very specific type that is very different from their father.
Right.
And that is kind of what bonds them. So, you know, it's just such a fun dynamic where she is the one who's kind of like going off all the time with all her neuroses, and he's kind of just like the straight man. I love Philip Seymour Hoffman too in this movie. I think they really play off each other so beautifully.
Yeah, Laura Linney really lucked out in terms of like who gets to be her brother in movies. Like she
Yeah,
got
Mark
Mark Ruffalo and
yeah.
You Can Count on Me, and then Philip Seymour
Mhm.
Hoffman in this. Like, wow, congratulations. But yeah, the sibling dynamic is really interesting too. I mean, I guess like for me, I'm always like kind of interested in the sibling dynamics because in sibling
Mhm.
dynamic stories because I'm an only child, so I'm just like, what is going on? What
Mhm.
is this? But the competitive nature between her character
Yeah.
and Philip Seymour Hoffman, especially like as creatives and that whole spiel with like is it like the Guggenheim
Yeah,
scholarship? Yeah,
fellowship.
the Guggenheim's
Yeah.
fellowship. And he's like, "You got the Guggenheim?" She's like, "Yeah." And then like it's eventually
Yeah.
revealed that she lied and
Mm,
it just becomes
right.
like this whole thing. Oh
And she
gosh.
makes it a thing about how like, oh, you thought like I couldn't do it,
Yeah.
but like because you couldn't, that
Yeah.
like I couldn't possibly have gotten it because you didn't, you brilliant man, that sort of thing.
Right. She like takes it to like a whole other extreme.
Yeah. Which again is like fully a lie and it's just spiraling out of control at a certain point, but shit's like, I'm just gonna commit to this because I want to get back at you.
Right. Yeah, she's in
It's so funny.
denial with a lot of things in her
Yeah.
life. Like, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
her job, but also like her terrible love life where she's like having the affair with the married man.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's that whole scene where she confronts him and then doesn't even take accountability for her role in the affair. And then when she's
Yeah.
like, "You are married, you are cheating, you are sleeping with a younger woman," and then he says something about like her age. So the fact that like she's even questioning like,
Yeah.
"Oh my gosh, I'm not a younger woman," she's like in denial
Yeah,
of how
like,
old
you're
she
not that
actually
much
is.
younger.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really funny.
So funny.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love it. She is just a very messy person, I think,
Mhm.
but Laura is just so funny that she is still a person you find yourself kind of rooting for and invested in.
Yeah.
It is funny because it's really not like a showy Oscar performance type of thing that you would think of, but she really, really elevates it to that
Mhm.
because of her very unique screen presence. Like, you look at this and you're like, this was clearly written for Laura Linney in mind because it's like everything she does best.
Yeah.
And even in the not so funnier moments where like she starts to feel these almost guilty feelings about putting their dad in the nursing home and like saying goodbye, and it's just like it just comes right out of her in the parking lot after they leave, where she says, "We're horrible, horrible, horrible people. We're horrible."
Right.
Because she feels like, they just dropped their father off at this place. He has no idea where he is. He thinks they checked into a hotel. And I think there's a real almost like a Catholic guilt sort of thing where she just feels like this inherent shame
Right.
in so many areas of her life.
Yeah.
And especially in being away from her dad for so long. And like this one time they finally reunite all these years later, it's to lock him away in a nursing home. Like it all just kind of like hits her at once. In the parking lot.
Yeah, it's like that's such a complicated relationship too, because it seems like they don't even really have a relationship with their father, and like what relationship they did have, it was not a positive one. So here they are again reuniting with him, and there's this sense of like moral obligation because he is their dad, but then at the same time it's like we didn't really have a great relationship, but now we're saddled with the responsibility of taking care of someone that we don't really have that great of a relationship with. Like it's so complicated.
And it's heavily implied that he was abusive to them.
Totally, yeah.
At least to John, because there's the whole thing of her writing this sort of semi-autobiographical play about their life. And we see the play at the end, and it's like this really disturbing glimpse into their childhood. And it's like, oh, now we see why we had such complicated feelings throughout this whole movie, and maybe also why the two of them are a little bit like not fully together in their adulthood because they had this horrible childhood. So in that respect, this is also a really well-written screenplay because, you get the explanation a little bit at the end without too much hand-holding, I suppose, about why they are the way that they are.
Right.
These savages.
Yeah.
Yeah. To revisit the big red pillow moment, because it really is so great. And it was actually her Oscar clip, for the record.
Oh, good.
Yeah. Before that, what I really enjoy is another scene where she like brings her cat over to the nursing home, and John is kind of like hemming and hawing about it and just like the irony of it. And she basically yells at him, "They reduce stress. Just fucking calm down about it." Like, it's so funny and highly relatable. But yeah, that leads into her, I would say, her Karen moment, quite frankly,
Yeah.
where she freaks out upon realizing her dad doesn't have that red pillow that she had gotten him, and going around all the nurses, and just like that gloriously bitchy moment
Right.
of saying to that one nurse, "Big red pillow."
Yeah.
Just so good. And when she sees that poor old woman in the wheelchair who's clutching it like desperately and literally rips it out of her hands.
Yes.
Just the awkwardness of all of that it's almost painful to watch. Like, if you don't love cringe comedy, that's just like unbearable to watch. But, it's just, this like other layer, I think, at the end of it, of just like this real heartbreak when her dad says he doesn't even want it. And he also doesn't even recognize her.
Oh, I know. All that work for
So
nothing.
just to have this incredibly heightened comedic scene, and then just like everything drops out for her upon that.
Right. Yeah, totally. It's like there's so many scenes like that where it starts off like really funny and she's like getting really exasperated, and then it's like it undercuts it like Tamara Jenkins like pulls the rug underneath you, and it's like, well, now we're here, and this is like the reality of what it's like to take care of someone who is losing their memory. Like, there's also that scene earlier on too when they're on the plane, and he's like having like a hard time like unbuckling his seat because he wants to go use the restroom, and then she's like, oh god, okay, and then she like gets up to help him, and they're making their way down the aisle, and then his pants fall, and it's just a whole thing. And that's like, I feel like for me, like that's the first time that she realizes like, oh, this is how it's going to be like from now on. Yeah,
it's painful, but it's just wild to me how well we balance the tones here, because it just goes from these wildly different tones. But I think I was reading like Tamara Jenkins said she really wanted to avoid too much obvious sort of sentimentality with the film. And I think you really feel that even towards the end when their father does die. Like, it is sad, but it's just it's not this like over the top scene for Laura at the end where she confesses and like talks about all these things that you did wrong, Dad, or like some tearful moment at the end. Like, it is just very frank about a lot of things about this situation, which I do really appreciate because it feels much more true to life.
Yeah.
But just to speak to one other comedic moment that I do enjoy is to go back to what we were talking about with the whole Guggenheim Fellowship thing, where John does confront her about it, and it's like pulling teeth at a certain point, but she finally does admit it, that she lied, but that it was actually she got a grant from FEMA.
There's like always like a loophole with her. That's what's really funny.
Yes. And just Philip Seymour Hoffman's performance in that scene is so perfect, where he's just like, what was the federal emergency?
Yeah.
And when she straight up says 9/11, I lost it.
Oh my gosh, yes. Oh my gosh, yeah. Oh.
And she talks about how like, oh, she worked near the Twin Towers and she was out of work for months, and she's so like annoyed and exasperated and embarrassed to even be explaining this. But it's so funny.
Yeah. It's so crazy that like Philip Seymour Hoffman, I know he like appeared in some of the precursors, but then when it got to the Oscars, like he was out of there. And then meanwhile, Laura Linney was not in the precursor conversation at all. And then she pops up at the very last minute. Yeah. It's just very interesting because they're both so good. Kind of like in a, well, not really like away from her because Gregory Pinsent didn't appear in anything, but it's like, how can you have one and not the other sort of thing? So.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of how I felt about, like, how can you nominate Laura Linney and not Mark Ruffalo?
Right.
You Can Count on Me.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, he's so good in that too. Ugh.
Yeah. So I really, really enjoy this film a lot. I think this is one that needs to be discovered more because, as you were kind of alluding to, it's not mentioned a lot these days.
Yeah.
This is another one that, like, I don't know if a Criterion would necessarily rescue it or anything, but, like, you know, it needs a reappraisal, I think, because it's so brilliant.
Yeah, I'd agree.
Yeah. Shall we move on to our last losing nominee?
Oh my gosh, this is a juggernaut.
Yes. All right. Elliot Page in Juno. So yeah, this should be an interesting one. Elliot Page. This is a little more than a decade before he came out as trans in 2020 and using he and they pronouns. So Elliot Page was born in Nova Scotia, Canada, assigned female at birth. He first started acting in Pit Pony, a Canadian movie that also became a TV show. Did quite a bit of work in Canada prior to 2005, which is where he got much more recognition for starring in Hard Candy, an indie movie that got him some critics recognition. And then Jason Reitman, the director of Juno, watched Elliot in Hard Candy and felt that he would be right for the lead role here. So Juno is a coming-of-age dramedy where Elliot's playing Juno McGuff, a sarcastic, wisecracking 16-year-old living in a small Minnesota town. Juno is alarmed to discover that she's pregnant with her friend Polly's baby, Polly played by Michael Cera. So at first, Juno decides she wants an abortion, but she changes her mind and opts to have the baby and gives it up for adoption. So she finds this local couple, Mark and Vanessa, Jason Bateman and Jennifer Garner, who are looking to adopt, and it looks to be a good match, but Juno eventually learns that there's tension between Mark and Vanessa, while she is also continuing to harbor feelings of her own for Polly, who seems to have moved on. So yes, let's get right into it. Elliot Page at Juno, certainly a unique situation we have here where we have an actor who we now see in a very different light, now in his true identity and, going back to this earlier stage in their life. So yeah, thoughts on Elliot Page overall and the Juno phenomenon of 2007 and his big performance here.
Yeah, this is a really interesting performance and movie to look at now, considering, the context of Elliot Page's life now. But I know people are going to judge me when I say this. This was my first time watching Juno.
Wow.
I know. Here we go. But it's not like I wasn't allowed to watch Juno. It wasn't that. It's just like I never watched Juno. However, I will say, like, out of all the movies that we discussed today, this was the one that I knew existed in 2007 and 2008. Like 13, 14-year-old me was like, yeah, Juno. Like, I think this movie was so popular. Like, it transcended its life in a movie theater where you don't even have to have seen the movie to be familiar with the iconography of the film. Like, I mean, when I started watching Juno, I saw like Michael Cera's track outfit. I was like, oh yes, of course. And then seeing Elliot Page's red hoodie, the jeans combo, like I feel like those were very popular Halloween costumes back at that time, which I don't know what that's like, maybe that doesn't really age well, but like I do distinctly remember that being a very popular Halloween costume. And then like also like the stop motion rotoscope style opening credits, and then even like the movie poster itself with like the orange and white stripes and that very specific font I don't know the name of, but that very specific font, it's so iconic. And then the songs from the soundtrack, you're like, oh yeah, this
soundtrack, oh my god,
this sounds very familiar. And like the whole acoustic guitar folksy kind of songs, like it feels very much like indie film of the mid 2000s. Not that that's like a bad thing, but it does, when you watch Juno, it does kind of serve as like a time capsule in a lot of ways. And I feel like too, like American media like post Juno started like was just like really obsessed with making programming about teen pregnancies, because I think like Secret Life of the American Teenager came out like in 2008 with Shailene Woodley, and then you had Teen Mom on MTV in 2009. So like there was like this whole boom about teenagers getting pregnant post Juno. But yeah, I mean, after the first watch, like I was like, okay, I get the hype. Like this is like a really good movie. Like the screenplay for me is like what stood out, because it's so unique. Like the way Diablo Cody writes dialogue and writes characters, like I feel like she's someone that you can tell immediately, like when you're watching a movie and you may not know that she wrote it, like you can tell it's a Diablo Cody script based off of like the rhythm and the cadence, and also like the kinds of words she like melds together that you wouldn't think would go together. I don't want to like describe it as like she's like Dr. Seuss, but because that might sound like offensive. But like she'll
No, it does have a certain language and a rhythm to it. I agree.
yeah, like
Yeah.
she'll like I wrote down like some like lines that I liked, like
Mhm.
your ego is prego. Like what? Like how would you like think of even rhyming those words together? Like what's the prognosis fertile myrtle, or this is one doodle. Oh wait, no. She says like that ain't no etch a sketch. This is one doodle that can't be undid. Home skillet. Like that's like very Diablo Cody. So for me,
Yeah.
when I was watching the movie, it's like yeah, the screenplay stands out. But I think Elliot Page is so good in this film, and the
Mhm.
fact that like he can really handle that dialogue, because I feel like if you give that to someone who may not be as talented, that might be really overwhelming to give them.
Mhm.
But he handles it so well, and his comedic timing is so great. But yeah, like overall, I really enjoyed it, and I think it's really cool that he was able to get in at this time, and then also that the movie was just so loved by the Academy as well. Because I think like out of all of the movies and best actress this year, like this is the only movie that gets in for best picture and other
Yep.
major categories too, like best directors. So yeah,
Mhm.
Juno, I get it, I get the hype.
Well, I'm glad that it held up
Yeah.
because I think for some people they are like, "Oh, this is a very 2000s movie," derogatory.
Oh, derogatory. Okay.
Because of some of that stylized dialogue
Yeah.
and just the indie sort of feeling of it. Like
Mhm.
some people kind of bristle at that, I think,
Mhm.
nowadays.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm glad it worked for you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really, first of all, just admire Elliot a lot, especially for coming out now and just living his truth, especially like, taking on this role as an activist too, and
Totally.
just has done a lot of good things with his platform, I think.
Mhm.
And I just think, when I think back to this mid to late 2000s period, like Juno was such an amazing breakout moment for me with him as an actor.
Mhm.
I don't think I had seen Hard Candy at the time, so this was definitely my introduction to Elliot Page. And I remember feeling like, I don't know if this is like revisionist history necessarily, but I remember feeling like it was a bit of like a Kristen Stewart type of situation
Oh.
where he didn't seem super comfortable with being in the spotlight, but also it was clear that there was talent there,
Yeah.
And it was only until, for example, Kristen Stewart would, come out and everything that she kind of seemed a little more free and loose and confident and kind of finding her lane. And, I haven't seen a lot from Elliot now, just like post transition, but I imagine he is much more comfortable now. And I was reading part of his memoir, actually, Page Boy, and he talks about being kind of uncomfortable with this whole award season thing
Yeah.
and being forced by his handlers and the people around him to wear a dress on red carpets where he really didn't want to, and all the interviews he had to do, and just the way people would write about him and the sexuality and everything. It was just a lot for a young person at this time.
Right.
So I definitely have a newfound appreciation of what he went through during this time period. But just to speak to the performance, I really, really enjoyed Elliot Page's screen presence around this era. Just like this quirky vibe, but also this really, really incredible vulnerability, especially in his face. Like, and this is one of those roles where it does seem like it was built around so many of his set of skills, kind of like what I was saying with Laura Linney.
Yeah.
And I just can't separate, Elliot Page from Juno and like imagine anyone else in this role without it feeling really kind of forced. Like I can imagine like, and maybe grating in another person's hands playing this role, just like getting into all this quirky dialogue and not really wrapping their mouth around exactly how to phrase it the right way and be funny and seem authentic and not seem like a total like annoying poser hipster type in a way that's off-putting. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, completely. I would agree. I think yeah, that's such a testament to his performance, because like you said, in any other less capable person's hands, like it's very easy for the character of Juno to be quite annoying, because Juno
Yeah.
talks quite a bit, and she's sometimes like, she's like in these situations where it is serious, but yet because of her youth and because of her naivete, she doesn't really know how to handle it. But I
Mm-hmm.
like the way, though, that Diablo Cody writes that character, because you know it's not coming from a place of Juno not being dumb. Like, you know, like, this character is smart. It's more so her age. It's more so those moments are speaking to her age and her innocence and her naivete in the situation. But yeah, Elliot Page is so good in this movie. And I think also, yes, the screenplay is shines quite a bit, and there's a lot of dialogue that they have to work with. But I think when you get those moments of just like silence from them, like,
Mm-hmm.
I'm thinking of the first time I watched this movie, and I kind of like sat up and I was like, oh, wow, like that was really special, was when there's that moment where Juno sees the Jennifer Garner character at the mall. And
Oh,
it's,
yeah.
you know, and Juno is just like kind of like looking at her, looking at Jennifer Garner playing with this child. And for me, I felt like that moment was like Juno kind of realizing like, oh, like that's what being a parent would look like, and knowing that their child was potentially going to be in good hands. You know, there's no dialogue whatsoever, but the fact that like she can, like, the fact that Juno is evoking, you know, that emotion just by looking at Jennifer Garner is just really, really special.
Yeah. I love all of those moments when we cut to the heart of who Juno is, kind of like beneath a lot of that cool girl, like sarcastic energy that, you know, she's bringing to all these people. Even in those bigger moments, like when she's saying, I'm pregnant, and
Yeah.
saying this, first of all, saying it to Polly first, and like waiting for his reaction. And he doesn't really know what to say. And so at first she's like, hey, you know, I might just nip it in the bud.
Yeah.
And I think there's a real disappointment in a way in, you know, in Juno's face when like Polly is acting a little too distant and says like, hey, you can do whatever you want. And it doesn't seem like to overtly want to get involved with this in a way that she would prefer. I love those moments for Paige when we just sort of cut through the sarcasm and see Juno's heart, and how she does sometimes, I think, use some of that witty dialogue in a way to be like a defense mechanism almost to kind of protect herself.
Yeah.
Like, it's very mature and just very smart instincts, and it really feels like an authentic teenager how they would act, I think, at this time where I don't know if there were a lot of characters like this other than like a Daria maybe
Yeah.
that were similar,
Yeah,
you know?
I would agree.
Because this was also an era of like Mean Girls, and that was a very different version of teenager, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. Yeah, because, yeah, Juno as a character, she's so different from the other teen girls at the time. Like, you know, characters that were played by like Lindsay Lohan, or I don't know who else was out at the time. Hilary Duff. I'm trying to like really rewind here, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Rachel McAdams.
Oh,
you know?
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so, yeah, it's just offering something very, very different. But to your point, I think was very influential. But it's really interesting to also watch her telling her parents, I'm pregnant, and just the sort of look on her face of like not fully knowing how they're going to react, but also wanting to be direct about it. Like, it's so complicated, this mix of emotions, especially when her father tells her, I thought you were the kind of girl who knew when to say when.
Yeah.
And you can tell it really, really hurts.
Oh.
And she just says, I don't really know what kind of girl I am.
Yes. Oh, God, because you can tell in that moment that she knows that her dad is disappointed in her. And she's also like a bit lost in that moment too.
Yeah.
But yeah, and I believe that moment when she tells her parents that she's pregnant, that was the Oscar clip, right? I'm pretty sure.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, it was.
Oh, gosh. But, you know, all things considered, I would say her parents handled that, like, pretty well.
Yeah, I think they're surprisingly on board.
Yeah.
After a certain point. And I appreciate that it doesn't weigh too much on the movie.
Yeah.
That part of it.
Yeah, because then that would be, like, a completely different movie.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, speaking to the sort of relationship that Juno forms with Mark and Vanessa, I think that is such a fascinating dynamic. And that's another thing where at first it feels like Juno is like really amping up the sort of cool girl sarcastic thing with them. And that does feel kind of purposeful, and in a way that's like she kind of like wants to make sure they're cool. Like she doesn't want to drop her kid off with just like anyone. You know, she wants the baby to like grow up in a really cool and accepting sort of household.
Yeah.
But I do love when they're talking about like open adoption, which would mean, you know, having Juno be involved during the whole process of the baby growing up and everything. But Juno is just like confused and wants it to be like old school, have the baby, put it in a basket, and send it your way like Moses in the reeds.
Yeah.
Such a great line. And then I love the line reading that Elliot Page has when Juno is just like, shit, yes, close it up. Like,
right.
Juno is cool.
Yeah, Juno is
There, I
really
said
cool.
it.
Juno is really cool. I was really surprised, like, you know, going in. I mean, I knew what the general storyline was, that, you know, Juno gets pregnant. But I was really surprised going in with how much Jennifer Garner and Jason Bateman's characters were involved, like, in the overall storyline. And maybe that's because, like, when I look at the poster, they're like not on the poster. Like, I was expecting to see Michael Cera more. So I just think like that dynamic between the three of them was really interesting, because I feel like, yeah, Juno is a coming of age story, but it's not the coming of age story that like you think it is. It's not like teen girl gets pregnant and then you're seeing scenes of her, like predominantly scenes of her going to high school and like being ridiculed by her classmates. It's like not that at all.
It's not.
It's really about like she kind of learns what it means to be an adult, a loving adult relationship looks like by spending time with the Jennifer Garner and Jason Bateman characters.
Yeah.
I was like, wow.
It's her glimpse into the real world.
Right.
You know?
And Jason Bateman's character is a monster in this movie.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
A real douche. Yeah. And of course, he seems to be set up to be the nice guy, cool, laid back, that kind of dude. But yeah, not great, Bob.
No.
But I will just say this might be a good time to point out, I think Jennifer Garner should have gotten a supporting actress nomination for Juno.
Oh my gosh. I wasn't really looking at the precursors for best supporting, but did she like pop up anywhere at all?
No.
Oh my God. Wow.
Not anywhere major anyway.
Justice for Jennifer Garner. I love when like I haven't watched every single Jennifer Garner movie, but I love when she just like pops up in these movies. Like, I'm thinking of like this, but also like Love, Simon, where she'll just have like really just like moving scenes, and you're like, oh my God, Jennifer Garner. Oh my God, I can't. I know. When I need a good cry, I just like watch the Jennifer Garner monologue and Love, Simon. She's like, you get to exhale now, Simon. Like, yeah, but yeah, she's so good in this movie, and it is like an interesting like flip, like you said, when you first meet them, you think like the Jason Bateman character is like the cool guy, and then Jennifer Garner's like
she's uptight.
Exactly. Like she's like the uptight, type A, very kind of like a bit like overcrowding the situation, like wanting to make sure everything is good, and she's always asking Juno like, are you sure you're not gonna back out? And then like, you know, when it flips by the end and it's like Jason Bateman is just this man child who he will never be Kurt Cobain. And, you know, you will never be Kurt Cobain. And when he says, like, when she's having that conversation, when Jennifer Garner's having that conversation with him towards the end, and she's asking him, like, oh, well, where are you going to live? And then he's like, a hotel. And then, no. She's like, where are you going to live? Like, a hotel? And then she's like, a loft. He says it, like, in a really, like, smug way, like, a loft. And then she's like, well, aren't you the cool guy? Oh,
I know.
Jennifer Garner. My gosh. And then, oh my God,
she deserved better.
She did deserve better. And then when Juno runs back, gives her the note, and we don't know what the note is until the very end. And it's like, if you're in, I'm in too. It's like, you know what? Sisters are doing it for themselves. Here we are.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, you know, the scene where Juno kind of realizes what's happening with when she comes over to see Mark alone and finds out that he's intending to leave Vanessa, and is very rightly calling him out on his bullshit of just like being scared of responsibility. It's a really good scene. And when he says like, how do you think of me, in this sort of creepy, almost romantic way, which seems like he seems to have like feelings for Juno to some degree.
Yeah.
And she's just upset and disgusted, and has this one very quirky Juno, like only Juno could possibly say it kind of line, where she's like, I just like being a piece of furniture in your weird life.
Yeah.
But like,
Yeah.
I think it becomes clear to her in that moment, and the moment right after that when Vanessa comes home, and that this is just like so much more complicated than she thought, and that people can be disappointing and messy.
Yeah.
And as she tells her dad, she's like starting to lose her faith in humanity. And I think the heartbreak is very direct in Elliot's performance. Like, there's so much going on in that face that's so revealing, I think. And just like realizing she still has some growing up to do, and there's just such a depth of feeling there with J.K. Simmons, of just like that scene they share where like Juno's been through so much over the past few months.
I know.
And has had to grow up very quickly
I know.
in realizing how humans can be towards each other, and not in a good way.
Right. Yeah, that relationship between Juno and Mark is very interesting to see how that evolves over the course of the movie. Like, when they started dancing together, I was very frightened and scared that this was venturing into a territory that I did not know this movie was going to go in. But yeah, I feel like they kind of serve their purpose to each other. Is like they're filling like the thing that they think they want. Because Juno, I feel like she is looking at the Jason Bateman characters like, you know, this cool older guy, and he has such sophisticated taste, and he has the electric guitar.
The guitar,
I know. I mean,
wants
like,
to be in a band.
Truly, the red flag should have been when he showed her the Sonic Youth version of Superstar from the Carpenters, and was trying to imply that was better than the Carpenters. Like, that should have been the initial red flag. So
yeah,
she didn't know any better.
That's a deal breaker.
Right. It's like, Juno, get out now. But yeah, like, she sees him as like this cool guy, and like he sees her as just, you know, a younger person who is not tied to the responsibilities of being an adult like his actual wife. So they kind of
he
are
wants
like
to be still young again.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
But he's not.
Yeah, he's not.
So it's tough.
I know. Oh God, gross. But yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Very much so. But it's interesting also how it parallels with Juno and Polly.
Yeah.
Where she is eventually inspired to tell Polly her true feelings at the end. And it's a very cheesy sort of teenage love kind of scene out on the track. But that is such a sweet moment between the two of them. Especially the line that I love, that I think Elliot Page really nails, is when Juno tells him, "You're golden, man."
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's the line. Like, just like, it's like one of the last things she says to him, right? Yeah. Yeah.
Like, maybe you could roll your eyes with a scene like that, but there is such a purity in Elliot's sort of approach to that scene of being like, hey, I love you. That's it. Like, I'm hooked on you, basically. Like, I know you like me as much as I like you. It's just like a really sweet little teenage love scene that really plays well, I think. Again, it could have been so annoying and cloying and cheesy.
Yeah.
But you want these two crazy kids to end up together, you know?
Yeah, I would agree. Like, I think her and Michael Cera are like so cute together. It's very sweet. And even though you really don't get that many moments of them together, yet like despite that, when they do get together at the end, you're like, oh, that's nice.
Yeah. So I really, really enjoy this performance, and I am happy that the Oscars also singled this performance out. I know, you know, Elliot Page got most of the precursors, and the film was doing so well that it was likely going to happen. But you know, it's always fun to see like a regular sort of teen comedy dramedy. I would say this is more of a dramedy than full comedy, but a movie like this being taken seriously by the Oscars
totally
needs to happen more.
Yeah, I can't like remember in like recent times anything quite like that off the top of my head. Yeah, I really So good job. Good
Right.
job, Elliot. You did it.
Good job, Elliot.
Yeah.
Yes, and we are hoping that Elliot comes back,
Yeah.
and gets another nomination. I think that would be really cool.
Mm-hmm. I think they have it in them, honestly. They just
Yeah.
need the right movie. There's so many things that need to align, but I think like
Yeah.
they are capable of that for sure.
Agreed. All right. Well, shall we move on to our winner?
Oh my
This
gosh.
is a big one.
Oh Lord.
A lot to unpack. Marion Cotillard in La Vie en Rose. Okay, so
Lord.
Marion Cotillard here winning her Oscar on her first nomination. She is only the second person in this category to win for an entirely non-English language performance after Sophia Loren in 1961. So it's been a while. But Marion Cotillard, to introduce her, she was born in Paris. She was in a family of artists and actors, so she was kind of interested in this field from an early age. She started learning English at the age of 11, but she primarily worked in her native French for her early stage of her career. She had roles in films like The Story of a Boy Who Wanted to Be Kissed and My Sex Life or How I Got Into an Argument. She was in Taxi, which was a popular series of films directed by Luc Besson. Eventually, she transitioned to a Hollywood career where she had a small role in Big Fish in 2003. She was in A Very Long Engagement, for which she won a César Award. But her first major English language role was A Good Year in 2006, only a year before. So really, really breaking through here. And then she was cast to play this very highly coveted role of Edith Piaf in La Vie en Rose, which the director, Olivier Dahan, said he cast her because of her resemblance to Edith, especially in her eyes. So Edith Piaf was one of France's most popular singers, becoming a star in the 40s, and she died when she was only 47 in 1963. And the film delves into her life pretty much from cradle to grave. So we have another classic music biopic here, and we see how Edith's early life was very troubled, her mother not really being a dependable person, her father leaving her to be raised by her grandmother in a brothel, but she had this one-of-a-kind singing voice, and she eventually became a star, and we cut back and forth between present-day Edith in her 40s, struggling with her addictions, and also nearing the end of her life, with the flashbacks to everything that led up to this, especially her dalliances with men and the many sudden losses that she experienced in her life, and kind of, I guess, how they informed her as an artist. So let's get into our winner here, Steffi. Thoughts on Marion Cotillard overall and her huge, huge Oscar-winning performance here?
Okay, so my first Marion Cotillard movie was the cinematic masterpiece, everyone's favorite movie musical 9.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
She's probably the best part of that movie.
She is the best part of that movie, thank you.
Yeah.
Other than Fergie.
Yes, oh my gosh. Thoughts on Kate Hudson's Cinema Italiano?
A bop.
I mean, yes. And then that's it. Period. The end.
Yeah. Yep.
But yeah, so that was the first technically my first movie with her, but then I watched La Vie en Rose, and then after that I watched 2 Days, One Night, and I feel like personally for me I really need to do the Marion deep dive at some point because holy shit, like this is quite the performance. I feel like I mean, I know you haven't gotten there, you're gonna get there, but just like for me right now, I feel like watching La Vie en Rose and then watching her other nominated performance with 2 Days, One Night, like they're so different, but her physical commitment is something that I think makes Marion really, really, really stand out. La Vie en Rose is an example of like the embodiment of one specific person, and she's so physical in this movie because she has those moments where she's like on stage singing like Edith Piaf, and then she just really lives a life. And then when you watch her in something like 2 Days, One Night, where a lot of it is this like internalized anxious stress, and she's really not physically doing a lot, but you can feel just like this imminent panic just from the way that she moves and the way that she sits. It's just like, wow, Marion Cotillard is just like so good. But this performance specifically, like it's like undeniable. And yeah, it makes sense that Olivia Dahan would like look at her eyes especially and be like she is the perfect Edith Piaf, because like so much of this performance, like you can't picture Marion Cotillard in this movie without like envisioning her eyes, because they're so
Yeah.
big and they're so expressive. And also like going back to her physicality, like the way she stands, and you see like an evolution of that in the movie itself, because like when she's younger Edith Piaf, she's kind of like not that confident yet, and she's, you know, living on the street and she's not poised, so she's not really standing up straight. And then as she becomes, you know, the star, the icon that we know her to be, she suddenly has a lot more confidence and she has like this, you know, grand diva attitude. And then as like her life really starts to unfold and it gets worse and worse and worse, and like, you know, things happen, people die, and then she gets sick, it's like she starts shrinking again. It's really, yeah, this is like an all-timer. I understand why people would say like, yeah, this is like one of the best, if not the best. Like it's undeniable.
Yes. Well, for me, I very distinctly remember watching this at the time
Oh
and
wow.
rooting so hard for her to win this year.
Mm.
Because it's like, here's this actress who I had never seen in anything before, giving this out of nowhere, go for broke
Oh yeah.
performance. And then also like seeing her out of this makeup and like seeing her on red carpets and this like gorgeous model looking woman
Yeah.
and just being amazed. And ever since then, I've just really loved her as a screen presence and found her so captivating.
Hmm.
Even like in French films, English films, it doesn't really matter, you know. There are times where maybe she isn't cast in roles that are fully worthy of her,
Yeah.
and there are some misses in there, like Dark Knight Rises is kind of a low point,
Hmm.
honestly, but you know, between this and, to your point, 2 days and one night, that's enough to make anyone a fan, I think.
Yeah.
And this is just a towering performance from start to finish. Like, I know there's a certain level of obvious, like, a showy acting here that some people could call over the top, but I truly think she transforms into Edith Piaf. And it's very similar to when I watch, like, Charlize Theron in Monster, where I just see her becoming an entirely new person,
Hmm.
you know,
Yeah.
and performing in a way that is, like, also unlike so many of her other roles.
Right.
So I'm always fascinated by performances like that, like when actors we now know and understand who they are as
Hmm.
actors, and then they pull off something that is like totally different from anything else that they've done.
Yeah.
It's fascinating.
She has it in spades. And it's like when you're watching this movie, because that's it, like it's interesting to talk about this movie and revisit it now in this era
Yeah.
of like oversaturation of music biopics. And it's like they're so formulaic and we know the beats that they're gonna hit. And you
Yeah.
know, I think a lot of the times too, when it comes to music biopics, like people get so obsessed with casting, and they get so
Yeah.
hung up on the idea of like, well, this person doesn't look exactly like this person, and therefore that's the reason why it's not gonna work. And then when the
Hmm.
biopic does come out, like sometimes I think like a lot of movies like genuinely exist just for the virality of a clip. And you'll have these people like on Twitter or TikTok or whatever other social media platform, and they're like doing like the comparison of like the real thing versus the movie, and like this, like see how close it is, and like depending on how close it is, that's why the movie is so successful. And like honestly, like I still haven't really like gone back and done my personal research of Edith Piaf, but that does it, like it doesn't even matter to me, because I feel like when you're watching Marion Cotillard, you're just like she's not constrained by the idea of like I need to be a perfect one-to-one match. She's really
Right.
going for like the essence of the person,
Hmm.
which, and there's so much freedom in her performance too. You don't see her like hung up on like, oh well, you know, she didn't really move like this, or she didn't move her mouth like that. But like you get like that's the thing with these, ultimately these movies, these biopics, like they're a performance, they're an interpretation of the person, and there has to be some level of freedom there. And I think like this is a perfect example of that.
Yes, I completely agree. And I also get annoyed when we get too hung up on having it be exactly right, every single little detail nitpicked to death.
Yeah.
And even like I get why some people are annoyed when we're playing around with some, you know, factual information that people know. I understand that part of it, but I think just dramatically, you know, what she is able to represent here is so much more than what the actual story is here, which I think like the film itself is not particularly great.
Oh no, it's a mess. Like
Yeah.
let's get the record straight. Like as much as we love this performance, it's like the movie itself is a literal mess. Like it's kind of like a kaleidoscope of moments. And honestly, like because I had watched a lot of these movies like a couple weeks back, and then I got to La Vie en Rose, and I was like not really that looking forward to rewatching it. And even though I was like able to like see some of it, like still I don't think I fully narratively understand what is going on. Like a lot of it for me when I'm watching this movie is just like experiencing the performance and not being hung up on trying to piece a narrative together, because clearly Olivia DeHaan does not care about trying to create a cohesive narrative as well. Like I wouldn't watch this movie if I wanted to learn something about Edith Piaf. Like it's so difficult to follow, and sometimes like there will be times when like we're in a particular time of her life and then we cut to something else, and it's like, well, I don't understand like why we're cutting to this now. And then you think like, okay, they're doing this thing of like past to present, and then like all of a sudden like they cut to her and she's old and she's dying, and then they cut back. It's just like there's no logic in the narrative timeline of this movie, which makes it really, really hard to follow. But yeah, so like I really wouldn't watch this movie if I actually wanted to learn like factual things about Edith Piaf. But even with all of that being said, like I think the fact that you on some level are still able to enjoy this movie, it's because of the performance.
I think whether Olivier DeHaan would agree or not, the reason to watch this movie is to see her performance.
Right.
It's not to see the story.
Yeah.
Honestly.
Yeah.
I think she really does like the lion's share of the work here. And it's so paint by numbers. And it's coming off the heels of like Walk the Line and Ray. And this very year, we had a parody of these kinds of movies, Walk Hard.
Right, yeah.
You know, and I think this is just as guilty as those of being very tropey and generic and like centering all this trauma and wallowing in it, but like not really getting to any like greater insight. But actually, to me, that is what makes me more impressed with Marion, because she is like crafting this character without very much perspective from the screenplay about like the point of any of this. But, you know, I think you feel this like very vulnerable little girl almost within the adult Edith, even, of someone who grew up too fast, who had a chaotic childhood and is like searching for all these things and love and happiness, and like finding that like everything she turns to in life goes dark eventually. And so I think it's another difficult film to watch because there is such little room for lightness or hope at all, but there is like that incredible voice ultimately at the end of the day, and that is what keeps her going, and this need to like connect with other people. So even though I don't think the film has a lot going for it, I think her performance is so towering that it's like, it doesn't even matter.
Yeah, it really is like one of those, it's a great example of like a performance that's able to transcend the quality of the film, because it's not a good film. So
right. I mean, I took note of the performance literally right away, just in her first speaking scene. Where she, not only is she nailing the kind of like quirky tone of Edith's voice and like the rasp of it, but also that sort of tired diva attitude too. Like there's something I've talked about a lot on this show, where we have like actresses playing entertainers and singers and artists and stuff, and how that sort of like one-of-a-kind star power isn't always captured by the actress. Here, I think it is. I think there's a real like live wire energy that's really, really captivating and very unpredictable in a way that I imagine, you know, Edith Piaf probably was, because of all the traumatic shit that she went through in her life, including like nearly going blind in her childhood and being raised in a brothel and like dealing with all these different lovers. So there's a really like almost weathered quality that Marion brings to it, even though like Edith is only in her 40s in that later stage, but she's like so brittle and like she could easily fall apart at any moment. Like if you just touch her, almost like you can imagine her crumbling.
Right.
Which I think gives the performance a real urgency. And it's so much more impressive to me knowing like, I don't know how old Marion was playing this, but like playing a very convincing, like, I don't want to say like old woman because she was only in her 40s, but when you look at her in the later stages of Edith's life, that is kind of what she's playing.
Yeah.
Like an older woman at that point.
Yeah, totally. I completely agree. And I think also her playing someone like an Edith Piaf who lived such a big life where like a lot of things happened, like it gives her a lot to work with, even though like maybe it's not necessarily like directly in the script and we don't really know like what Olivier Dahan told her, but you know, when you have someone who has lived such a larger than life, I guess like to some degree that gives you a little bit of like room to a little bit of like creative freedom to kind of fill in the blanks on your own, and gives you a lot of, I don't know, dramatic material to work with. But yeah, you made a point too about like there's not really that much like lightness in the movie because it's really like, oh my god, she goes through this and then she goes through this and then she goes through this, and then you're also kind of like, I don't know where in the timeline we are, but I feel like for me, like one of my favorite, like when I think of this movie and like something that I can really like coherently remember that was sort of like a light moment in her life was that relationship with Marcel.
Yeah.
Because, you know, then we get the big Marcel moment.
Which ultimately turned dark, but yeah.
Yeah, but like, I really liked that. I was just like, oh, I'm so happy for her that she's like kind of finding love in like a really bleak, dark, lonely life. But I'm sure we're gonna talk about that scene.
We could talk about it now. I mean, like the whole Marcel segment of the film, I do enjoy as well.
I think that's like honestly like the most inspired directorial moment in this movie is that sequence.
Yeah. But I think even like leading up to it, just the buildup of the relationship and how she has this very intense fixation almost on Marcel as being like, oh, he is like my one and only now, and he is my one true north almost. Like the scene where she's like telling her friends at a party about how much she loves Marcel, but like she knows she can't have him because he's with someone else, and she's upset about that, but like she's trying to play it cool almost in this sort of romantic, very French way, I would say, where she's like saying these things very casually, but her feelings are very apparent in her face and much deeper than she's even letting on. But yes, to talk about the scene where I think is probably one of her most famous moments in the film, which is when she learns that Marcel's plane crashed.
Oh my god.
And that he died, and she can't even really accept it, and she collapses to the floor and is screaming out, Marcel, Marcel, over and over.
Yeah.
And trembling too.
Yes. Oh my gosh, and that's like pretty much like one long tracking, or they try to make it appear like it's just like one long take.
Yeah.
And because like it really begins with her and Marcel. She wakes up and he's there in bed with her, and then she thinks like, oh, he made it back, and then she like goes out into the kitchen where there's someone from her team like there, but she looks so distressed. And she's wearing, she looks like she's cried quite a bit, and she's wearing black. And meanwhile, Edith Piaf is just like in her own happy love bubble. And then she goes back to him and he's still there. And then she's like, oh, I need to get the watch. And then she leaves again. And there's just like, the longer the scene goes on, because they're not cutting at all, there's just like this sinking feeling that something is wrong. And then you're looking at everyone else in the scene and you're like, why do they look so upset? What's happening? And then they finally like kind of break the news to her that he died in a plane crash, and just like the way Marion Cotillard performs in that scene is just whew, devastating. Like she really
You get
commits.
chills.
Yeah, she really commits to grief.
It's a real anguish. Yeah.
Wow.
Very, very startling.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I do also like the sequence. I think that's sort of in between the Marcel stuff where it's like the musical performance where she can hardly keep it together on the stage and like kind of forgetting some words and kind of slurring her speech and all that.
Yeah.
Where it's like the way she's singing, it's almost like she's being like attacked almost from the inside. Like she's like barely getting out these words in her performance, and just like this rising panic in her eyes, in the feeling of like not being able to control what's happening and like excusing herself. It's like really, really tough to watch. And especially after she goes backstage and has to be, I think it's implied that she's like injected with something because she wants to go back on and, you know, and she powers through it, but then she collapses. I think we've definitely seen scenes like this before in other music biopics, obviously, but
for sure.
Very, very painful, but very effective in showing someone who is clearly having a nervous breakdown, essentially.
Yeah, she goes through a lot in this movie, for sure. And then what's also so strange, too, is like, kind of like what I was saying earlier, where I wouldn't rely on this movie for facts. Like if I wanted to learn like actual, like, you know, hardcore, like hard facts about Edith Piaf, is like sometimes they'll like throw out a piece of information where you're like, oh, like that feels fairly significant, but we never really saw that in the movie. Like when they like offhandedly like mention her husband, I was like, wait, she got married? Like,
I know.
Did I miss something? Like I thought I like maybe fell asleep in the middle of watching the movie, and I was like, oh no, they just like completely glossed over that. But yeah,
and there's also so many like men that come in and out of her life that it's like, wait, is that the same guy as, you know, before? Because it's like non-linear timeline, so it's like jumping all around.
Right.
Yeah, a very odd way of structuring this film. Which again, I don't really like. Maybe to your point, it is like, oh, she's reflecting on the past and we're kind of like seeing how she was molded into the person she is, and I don't know, now she's dying at the end of her life and looking back on it, it's just, I don't know. I think it's just too chaotic and it needed to be a little more streamlined. And I think it didn't need to be 140 minutes.
I know.
I'm just going to add that
It
too.
is quite the commitment that you are making. Like, I think it's a commitment that is worth at least one go for anyone that loves actresses and wants to watch like major actressing. But I mean, I don't know if I would like, you know, redo this ride over and over and over again. Like, I'm really just like searching for key scenes if I want to experience the magic of Marion and Levy and Rose. So
yes, absolutely. Well, I think one of those key scenes is the very end, you know, where she is singing Non, je ne regrette rien at the very end, which is just a total tour de force. And, you know, you just see her on the stage, not even blinking, just like looking out to this one spot out into the theater. And just like the focus and the drama that she brings to that performance.
Oh, yeah.
I think that is such a key to why so many people have loved Edith Piaf over the years, is that she is such a convincing sort of storyteller through her songs, and you feel so much of her pain. And I think, to the film's credit, like by the time you get to the end, you get where all that pain is coming from. Because you've seen so much of it, quite frankly. But then it's just like pouring out of her in this beautiful way, which is not to say that like the pain was worth it, but it sort of is like at least some good could come of all of this horrible stuff that she's had to go through, because she has this incredible voice with how she can channel that pain.
Right. It's a testament to also like the true like show woman that Edith Piaf is, and it like plays into that like long running idea of like the show must go on, you know? Because like you said, like she endured so much, yet she was able to like funnel all of that, you know, chaos in her life into something like beautiful with her music. So yeah, I'm interested like if Edith Piaf fans like this movie. I wasn't able to like research that.
I'm not sure.
I mean, it's, I don't even know if I would say like it's one of the better music biopics, because like, you know, like we keep saying the movie's kind of but in terms of like performance, like at least you got a really good performance out of it, you know? Because there's some music
Yeah,
biopics
I
where
mean,
it's like, this is like freaking terrible all around. So
yeah, no. And this is like one of those where the talent on the screen is just undeniable, what she brings to it.
Yeah.
And she fully becomes her in a very, like, not to sound too hippy-dippy with it, but she fully feels like she's channeling Edith Piaf at certain moments in this film.
Yeah,
So
totally. I think I was like reading somewhere too that like people, maybe it was like in France or maybe just like in general, they were like watching this movie, it's like watching Edith Piaf be reborn. I don't know if they were like hardcore fans, but like I could see that because she's just like, there's just so much freedom in that performance. So
yeah. Absolutely. So it's really, really incredible. Don't let the weakness of the film prevent you from at least checking it out.
Yeah.
Like you said, at least once.
Yeah, at least once.
So, yes. Once is enough, maybe.
Yeah. And then just search for Key Seeds on YouTube.
Yes, absolutely. Yes. And I don't know if I brought this up, but like she does lip sync the whole movie.
Yeah.
All of those musical performances. And I think it's incredibly convincing. Like, this is not one of those where it seems like this person is clearly just lip syncing to this iconic singer. Like Rami Malek in Bohemian Rhapsody, I think, is a very key example of someone who is kind of guilty of being like, you know, acting feels different than him lip syncing. It just feels like two different people. But anyway.
Yeah, I would agree with that for sure.
Yeah. Okay. So let's get to the Oscar discussion here. This should be interesting.
Wow, here we go.
Yes, yes. So for the first time since, I would argue, like 2002, we had a real race going on in Best Actress this year. Like everything else in between has felt very like foregone conclusion. So the critics really went for Julie Christie in a pretty big way. She got New York Film Critics, National Society of Film Critics, National Board of Review, lots of other minor critics. Marion Cotillard won the Los Angeles Film Critics, Boston, London, Vancouver. Elliot Page won the Independent Spirit Award, Chicago, Toronto, other minor critics. I mean, those were the three, pretty much, they were the only ones winning anything with critics. And then with the major precursors, it was a split race. So Julie Christie and Marion Cotillard won the Golden Globes for drama and comedy musical. Julie Christie won at the Critics' Choice Awards and SAG, but then Marion Cotillard won at BAFTA. So it was kind of like, who's it going to be? Is it going to be Julie Christie? Is it going to be Marion Cotillard? I love when there's no obvious consensus winner. So here's the question for you. Why do we think Marion Cotillard was our winner?
Okay, well, first, I think the performance is genuinely like very, very, very good. Like we've kept saying, it's like undeniable.
Yeah.
Like this isn't a performance that you have to really convince other people. Like, you guys, like this one's so good. Like you made like an earlier point that was like so good when you talked about how I think like when she's out for award shows or she's like doing press junkets and like they might cut to clips of her in the movie and then you actually see Marion Cotillard, like that does make an impression on you because you're like, how is that the same person? It's just the transformation is really, really dramatic. So, I mean, you have that going. She has that going for herself. I think also just like in terms of the performance too, like it is like the biggest one of the five where
by far
for sure. And like also the way her character functions in her movie, it's like an evolution of the character over a lifetime. Whereas like the other women in this category and Elliot Page, their stories aren't set up in that way. It's during like a very concentrated period of time. So maybe like outward perception is like, oh, because this is a story, it's a biopic from like young adulthood to when she dies. It's like, you know, the ask is bigger, the job is bigger. Also, like in terms of trends, compared to like previous winners in the decade, like this ticks off like so many boxes. Like first off, it's a biopic about a real person, just like how Erin Brockovich was, just like how The Queen was the previous year. And then on top of that, it's a music biopic, just like Reese in Walk the Line and just like Jamie Foxx for Best Actor with Ray. And then you have like the physical transformation aspect, like Nicole Kidman in The Hours or Charlize Theron with Monster. And, you know, like I said, when you see Marion at all of these other like award shows and press junkets and you like compare her to the way she looks in the movie, it's really like startling. And it's a combination of like her performance and the makeup, which I believe won at the Oscars. She's really the only other person in the category with such a dramatic physical transformation. Like maybe Cate Blanchett to a certain extent, but like this is like, whoa, how are you the same person? And like the cynical view of that too would be like, oh, she's like deglamming because she is like a young, beautiful actress. But then when you describe it as deglamming, it's kind of like an insult towards Edith Piaf. So I'm not going to say it is, but like, you know, some can interpret it that way. But yeah. And then like, even though we said like the movie was not good, critically though, like her performance is like praised unanimously across the board. And bringing up BAFTAs too, like that particular year, the BAFTAs were a better indicator of who was going to win more than the SAG, because like all the BAFTA acting wins matched the Oscars, whereas with SAG it was different with Best Actress and Best Supporting Actress. I believe Best Actress was Julie Christie, and then Best Supporting Actress was Ruby Dee. So the SAG was trending towards like older, more established women, where it felt like with the BAFTAs, they were like clearly going much younger. And then like, you know, looking at the press junket interviews that Marion was giving at the time too, like if people want to consider that, like she's very likable, she's open, she's gracious and grateful to be there, which I think is really key, because you don't want someone who's just like phoning it in or they're not really participating. Like she seemed to be someone who wanted it, but was also just like happy to be there, which I think is key. So when you have like the performance that's there and the personality of its star is very like likable, like you can understand like why Academy voters would go for her. Like, of course, like I would want her to win too. It seems like really like the only thing that might have been working against her was the fact that she was from a non-English foreign film, and you know she breaks so many records by winning, but I mean, if there was a non-English performance to break these long-standing records, this performance would be the one. So I think that's for me what I would say is why Marion ultimately triumphs in the end.
You pretty much nailed it. I don't have much to add, honestly, because you covered a lot of bases there. And to your point about her being charming and sort of like going on the campaign trail to a certain extent, you put that up against Julie Christie, who, you know, I was there at the time kind of watching the race, but I wasn't super invested in exactly like every single thing that was happening, but I was just looking back on it, and there was some talk about how Julie Christie wasn't really out there too much and like invested in wanting a second Oscar, because she has done this before many years ago. And like I said before, she's like not super interested in the whole like dog and pony show of like show business necessarily. So
because I was like trying
she didn't really
because I was like trying to find on YouTube, like when I was researching, like, oh, I want to hear what Julie Christie has to say about this movie, and I like literally couldn't find anything. So I was like, maybe her interviews got like wiped off the internet, or maybe I have to look somewhere else, but I really couldn't find anything. But if you look up, you know, Marion Cotillard, at least, like there's a lot there. So
so I think that is one of the difference makers in a very tight race. So yeah, it is by far the showiest performance. She's playing a real person. She's fully transforming, if not deglamming, we can say transforming, I guess. On top of this being a breakout performance where at this point she's becoming like an international star. It's like, you know, you look back on it now and it's like, well, of course she won. Like it's very obvious. And I think that is, a lot of that is why. But I do think it is worth considering just what the discussion was at the time. So, like, if you look at the other nominees, like, Cate Blanchett wasn't happening. Laura Linney didn't have much of a chance because she hadn't even gotten in any of the other major precursors, and she kind of snuck in at the last minute. Elliot Page had some critics' love, and Juno was clearly the most well-liked film in this category by the Academy, so I'm sure Elliot got a few votes in that respect, but at the same time, I don't know if some voters thought of it as like a big acting achievement, and sort of like what we were discussing a little, I feel like Diablo Cody's screenplay is kind of like the star of Juno in a way.
Yeah, totally.
Even if Elliot is, you know? So if you have Julie Christie versus Marion Cotillard, I mean, Julie Christie had a lot in her favor. She was coming back, 9 years after her other comeback in Afterglow.
Which was
showing she... Yeah, well, yes. But this was much better received.
Yeah.
And proving she still had it, turning in a very heartfelt performance, very sensitive and moving, and something that clearly a lot of people responded to. But then you have Marion Cotillard, and, it's like, yes, she ticks all those boxes, but it had been almost like 50 years since the last non-English language performance had won in this category.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there was definitely also a feeling, even at the time, that she was a lot better than her movie,
Mm-hmm.
But I think what it came down to also, maybe, was just that, Marion really surprised people and kind of came out of nowhere. And I imagine, like, this is just fan fiction at this point, but, like, if they had polled voters right after nominations, just did a full poll of the Academy, I'm guessing Julie Christie might have won that. And I'm going to assume that a lot of voters watched La Vie en Rose after she was nominated.
Yeah.
And when they did watch it, they were like, oh, well, Julie Christie is great and we love her and she's an icon, but I don't know if I'm fully bowled over by what she does in a way from her.
Right.
And then you have Marion Cotillard, who's like ticking every single box that we love.
Yeah.
We, the Oscar voters, and it's like so in line with almost every other winner this decade. And it's like, here we are. This is what we like. This is what we want.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like there was a bit more of like a feeling of respect for Julie Christie versus like a real love and a passion for what Marion Cotillard was doing.
Right. Yes.
Which can be the difference in many Oscar races.
Right. Like you revere the older actress, but you respect the performance from this like new up and coming person. Yeah. I do wonder too, like, I was trying to look this up. Like, I wonder if like Marion Cotillard's win at the BAFTAs, like, was it possible that influenced Academy voters too? Like, I was trying to figure out like when did Academy voting close that year?
Yeah, I don't remember exact.
I don't even know if like you can actually like look that up, but
yeah, I don't know. But yeah. And showing that there was an alternative to Julie Christie, I think that can help because Oscar voters like to go with a winner, So I think having that as an alternative really was very appealing,
Yeah.
So
do you think like age also might have had something to do with it? Because like I was like kind of crazy and I like made a table of how old every, like starting from the 2000s, like how old every single nominee was at the time of when the Oscars aired. And I found like this really interesting trend specifically in the 2000s that most of the winners in the 2000s, they skewed in their 30s. The only like outlier was Helen Mirren, which was the previous year. Yep. So I'm wondering if like there was a part, like there may have been some people that were like, oh, well, we already gave it to like an older person this year. We want to give it to someone different, a younger, like we want to skew younger again because that was maybe like another trend of the decade. I don't know. That might be a reach, but it's
even if they didn't consciously think that way, I'm sure it was a subconscious thing.
Right. Subconscious bias for sure.
Yeah.
Don't know.
But it's a really cool moment. I think Julie Christie was perfectly fine with losing, honestly. Like you look at her little box when it happens and she's very happy for Marion.
It's delayed. Her reaction is like delayed.
Yeah. Takes her a bit to process it, but she's happy.
Yeah.
But Marion was like so unbelievably happy and surprised. Her speech is so endearing, especially thank you life, thank you love.
Yeah.
It's so from the heart. There's nothing rehearsed about it. No paper that she's reading. Like it's just so great. I get chills every time I watch it.
And we want to see like people who win be like genuinely happy and grateful in that moment. And we kind of like, I love the Oscar speeches where it's just like they're processing so much on stage and it's just like a lot of emotion. Those speeches like tend to be the best because it's just like coming from such a genuine place. So hers definitely is an example of that.
One of my favorites.
Yeah.
Ever.
So many quotes.
So yes, it is true. There are some angels in this city. I mean, This is why I tune into the Oscars every year
Yeah.
for a moment like that.
For sure.
You know?
Mhm.
Okay, shall we move on to Twitter questions?
Yes. I'm excited, but I'm also like very nervous for this segment because like, wow, these questions are
I know.
lot.
Very
Yeah.
detailed.
Yeah, your listeners are very well watched.
Yes, they certainly are. Okay, well, Joey Gentili said, Marion Cotillard is the single best decision the Academy ever made here. Do you feel the Academy will ever make this good of a decision for a winner ever again?
Oh my gosh, wow, that's like such a I would optimistically say hopefully and yes.
I would also add, I think that they have made good decisions since then.
Yeah. I think we've had good
Maybe
winners.
Joey doesn't agree.
Oh.
But
yeah, Joey, start naming names.
I don't know. Yeah. You will hear my further thoughts on this category in the weeks to come. I don't want to spoil anything,
Ooh.
but I think there have been plenty of good decisions in this category where I agree with the winner.
Oh, well, I'm excited to tune in then.
Yes. Ben Roberts and Chad Conselmo both had the same question, which was whether we would rank Marion Cotillard as one of the best actress winners of all time.
I mean, I would say she's one of the best, but I mean, you're like the master of best actress history. So where do you think she like kind of, would you rank her among your personal best? Or are you waiting to reveal it at the very end of your journey?
I mean, I have a public letterbox list that I am just,
Okay.
adding a new performance each time I rewatch it for this show.
Mm-hmm.
So people can fully see where I'm ranking at least the first 80 years of winners here.
Wow.
She's in my top 10.
Wow.
Yeah. She is actually directly my number 10
Oh,
as of right now.
Okay.
Yeah. Her and Charlize are right up there as, two of the best of the modern era for me.
That's fair. Yeah.
Yep.
I could see that.
But there may be more to come. We shall see. Steve, no, not that Steve, the other one, said, Cotillard won for a film that is overlong, tedious, and disorienting, and not in a good way. Best Actress is often home to winners who are the best thing about a bad film. Who are some other winning examples of this?
Oh my gosh.
Well, I've had to watch quite a few.
Yeah,
so
you go.
I did write a few of these down. Halle Berry and Monsters Ball. Not a great film. I guess Jessica Lange in Blue Sky. I know a lot of people don't really even like her performance in Blue Sky, but that is campy, glorious Jessica Lange diva, which is fun.
Okay.
I think
Uh-oh.
also controversial, but Renee Zellweger in Judy.
Oh, okay.
I don't think Judy is a good film. I think Renee is, from what I remember, good, but I will have to rewatch it to see.
Yeah.
Very controversial also, but I'm going to say Elizabeth Taylor in Butterfield 8.
Okay.
So those are some of mine.
Yeah, I'll just co-sign on that. I remember watching Judy in the theater and I was like fine with it, but I definitely like very much was drinking the Kool-Aid of like the Renaissance at the time.
Yeah.
So, and it happened. So
A lot of us were.
yeah.
Yeah. Glorfidel of Gondolin said, Marion Cotillard's portrayal of Edith Piaf is one for the ages, but the film isn't on the same level as her performance, in my opinion. Has this hindered her status as an Oscar winner in any way? How has this film aged? I still believe her performance is a marvel. Well, yes.
Yeah. I feel like we kind of like answered that. Like, I don't think like just because she's in a bad movie that mars the performance or mars the Oscar win, because like I feel like it's possible for us to separate the performance from the movie, and the fact that like we're able to do that is just a testament to how good the performance is with her. So yeah.
And I think we should be able to separate the performance from the other elements of the film that she is not responsible for.
Yeah,
so,
it's not her fault that like Olivia Dehaun was like, let's tell it in a kaleidoscopic way. So
yes, no regard for if any of this tracks narratively. Yeah. Owen Daly said, what other French leading ladies of the 21st century would you have liked to win or be nominated?
Oh gosh, I mean, I feel like the obvious answer would be like Isabelle Huppert, right?
Yeah, for anything.
Yeah.
She was nominated for Elle, but like she needs more than one nomination.
Yeah, that needs to happen hopefully soon. I don't know if she like, I'm sure she has. She's always working, right?
Always working.
So,
yes. Yeah. I would also add both of the women from Portrait of a Lady on Fire.
Oh, yes.
Naomi Merlant and Adele Haenel.
Oh my gosh, such a shame that was not France's pick. that year.
Yeah.
What a fumble.
Major foul.
What a fumble.
Yeah. Yep.
Not their first time.
Yep.
So
True. Very true. And just to be cheeky, I would also throw in Agatha Roussel for Titan.
Ooh. Okay.
Yeah. And I mean, it's not really like that she's speaking French, but like Julie Delpy for the Before movies, I think.
Okay.
You know,
Yeah.
she is a French actress, so
We'll bend the rules
I think
a
it
bit.
counts.
Yeah.
Okay. Celluloid Siren said Marion is the second French actress after Simone Signoret to win this category. What other French actress would you have given a win in this category, nominated or not, and for which film?
I'll stick with my answer so you can go.
Okay. Yeah. I would go very old school and say Renee Falconetti in The Passion of Joan of Arc, which is technically a silent film performance, but it is a French film, which would have been eligible for the first year of the Oscars. I don't know if there's anything more recent that I can think of as like would give my win necessarily, other than Marion.
Yeah. For a second, I was like, when I saw that question, my mind immediately went to, oh my gosh, Sandra Hüller. But I was like, oh wait, no, she's German because she's in a French.
Yeah, she's German.
Movie, so yeah.
Right. Tricky.
Yeah, loophole.
Ben Roberts said, rank these performances as real-life singers. Marion Cotillard in La Vie en Rose, Sissy Spacek in Coal Miner's Daughter, Reese Witherspoon in Walk the Line, Barbara Streisand in Funny Girl, and Renee Zellweger in Judy.
Oh, man.
Barbara number one.
Yeah, I feel like we would like burst into flames if we didn't put her at number one. Like she would just like inherently go somewhere. So let's put her at number one. I'd say
suddenly she would get a chill up her spine.
Yeah, we'd get a notification on her vote or something. I don't know. Marion at number two.
Yep. And then Sissy Spacek at number three.
Yeah.
For me.
Yeah, I would agree too. And then I'm saying Reese 4, Renee 5. It's been a while since I've watched Walk the Line and Judy, but I'm just sticking to that.
No, it feels right.
Okay.
Yeah. Another ranking, I can just do this one real quick.
Go ahead.
Alicio said, rank these Oscar-nominated or winning lip syncs.
Oh.
Marion Cotillard in La Vie en Rose, Angela Bassett in What's Love Got to Do with It, Jessica Lange in Sweet Dreams, Eleanor Parker in Interrupted Melody, Susan Hayward in With a Song in My Heart. And for fun, where would Rami Malek rank? Well, I'm going to put Marion Cotillard number one. I think she won this lip sync battle. Number two would be Angela Bassett. Very convincing. I guess I would do, I watched them for the show, but it's been a long time since I've seen Eleanor Parker or Susan Hayward in these, but we'll do Eleanor Parker and then Susan Hayward, and then bringing up the rear, Jessica Lange. Sorry, Jessica. Not one of your finest hours. And then for fun, Rami Malek would be last. Moving on. I don't know if you have anything to add there.
No, that's good.
Let's see. Jim, another ranking here. A lot of ranking questions. Jim said, rank the following French language nominated performances: Anouk Aimée in A Man and a Woman, Isabelle Adjani in The Story of Adele H, Marie-Christine Barrault in Cousin Cousine, Isabelle Adjani in Camille Claudel, Catherine Deneuve in Indochine, and Marion Cotillard in La Vie en Rose. Whew. Okay.
You go. I have
number
no answer
one,
for this.
Marion Cotillard. Underline, number one. Number two, Isabelle Adjani in The Story of Adele H. Number three, also Isabelle Adjani in Camille Claudel. And then the ones I don't really care for, 4, Anouk Aimée in A Man and a Woman. 5, Catherine Deneuve in Indochine. And 6, Marie-Christine Barrault in Cousin Cousine, a nomination that puzzles me to this day. Okay, Lizzie said, how has Marion's win influenced international ladies' future on the ceremony?
When do you know off the top of your head, like when the next international nominee happens?
I think it is Emmanuel Riva for Amour.
Okay.
In 2012.
Okay. I feel like, I don't know if it's maybe like her win specifically influences more people, more foreign nominees to get into the category, or rather there's kind of like this feeling, this sentiment as time has progressed, like the Academy needs to be more open to foreign movies and non-English performances. But I'm not quite sure if that's like directly because of Marion Cotillard's win, you know?
Yeah. I don't know if there's been much impact necessarily.
Yeah.
Like, we haven't seen another non-English language winner in this category, unless you count like Michelle Yeoh, but there's a lot of English in that performance too.
Right,
So
yeah.
not particularly. I think the real impact was the Academy like expanding their membership to be more international and allowing for more international films to be recognized overall, because we have more people from around the world voting.
Right.
And that's kind of lifted the chances in all of the categories, not just Best Actress.
I mean, like Anatomy of a Fall, like this past season. It's a good example of that.
Right,
so.
exactly. And The Zone of Interest. Yeah.
And then Parasite even winning too.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep. Hi Girls Hi Louise said, category is Best Screech Off. Who wins? Who wins between Marcel, and I have a hurricane in me that will strip Spain Bear if you dare to try me.
Okay, I feel like Marcel is honestly more screechy, but I think I Have a Hurricane in Me is more iconic.
Correct. No nuts. Agreed.
There we go.
Yes. Christoph said, is this Cate Blanchett's only filler nomination?
Yes. To me. I don't know. What are your thoughts?
I think so. Yeah. I think all her other nominations are worthy. This felt a little more like a role, like the role is helping to lift her into the category rather than the performance.
Yeah.
She's playing Queen Elizabeth again.
Right. Yeah, I would agree. I would give back this nomination, and I would maybe, I don't know if this is controversial, I would give her a nomination potentially for Nightmare Alley, because I just thought she was so good in that movie.
Delicious performance. Yes. Yeah. Joey Gentili said, Kate gets a lot of BS for this nomination. When people forget I'm Not There exists.
Oh my gosh.
Rude. She is far better in the sequel compared to the original. Disagree. Why do you think people have such a visceral reaction to this one?
To Elizabeth the Golden Age?
Yeah.
I wonder if like that is partly, well, I mean, first off, like what's the person's name who asked?
Joey Gentili.
I feel like we need to come to terms with reality and admit to ourselves that Elizabeth the Golden Age is not a good movie. So I think we could start there. But I also think, like, I wonder if a lot of people's, like, ugh, with the movie and with the performance is because of the way that Kate herself reacted to her own Oscar clip. Because, like,
I think so.
That is, like you see that gift, like, especially if, like, you're on like film Twitter, you see that reaction all the time. So it has like impacted, I'm sure, the way other people see that movie and that performance. So
I think that kind of gave people permission to not like it.
Yeah. I'm like, well, if she doesn't like it, then I won't like it either.
Yeah. I mean, we talked about a lot of our problems with it. It's presented in such a messy way, and she is not given the opportunity to show a lot of nuance. Yeah, sure, she's hamming it up and having a lot of fun, but at the end, I'm just kind of like, to what end?
Yeah.
You know, to what end?
Well, she got paid and had fun, so.
Well, yes, that's fair. And got an Oscar nomination, so. Okay, Christoph said Cate Blanchett claims to have voted for Marion Cotillard in this race. Do you believe her?
I think she's a lot. No, just kidding. I believe her. I feel like she's like been asked several times about like her thoughts on Marion Cotillard, and there was even that interview she did like a press junket interview, I think, for one of those like How to Train Your Dragon movies at Cannes, and like a reporter straight up asked her like, who do you think is better, like you or Marion Cotillard? And she said, like, I love Marion Cotillard. And she just like went on this like whole spiel about how much she loves her. And I don't really think like that's a front. Like, I think Cate Blanchett is one of those people that really does uplift other people's performances. Like when she was on the awards campaign for Tar, like that was practically all she was doing every time she appeared at an award show, was like name dropping so many other people's performances. So I think when she genuinely really enjoys an actress or a performance, like she's gonna make it known. So yeah,
good for her.
We love an advocate.
I believe her.
Yeah. Believe women.
Believe women.
Believe women.
Same page. Yep.
Yes.
Danny Kish, Cate Blanchett has publicly stated she voted for Marianne to win over her own performance. What other nominated actress from the 2000s is most likely to have also done this at some point?
Like
I have a very easy
answer
for this. Yeah, I think Meryl Streep has done that.
Oh, yeah.
I think so.
Yeah, I would
Especially
agree.
for some years where she's like, Florence Foster
Oh my
Jenkins, like, I'm not
gosh.
going to vote
I
for
can't.
myself.
I
Like,
can't. Oh my God. What
like,
was
maybe I'll
that?
vote for Isabelle Huppert,
Yeah.
not me. Yeah.
I could take one for the team. Yeah. Yeah.
Maddie Lucas said Cate Blanchett is doing something close to camp in the Golden Age, but judging by the way she cringed during her Oscar clip, do you think she was embarrassed by this nomination?
Okay. Ooh, gosh. I don't know if she was necessarily like embarrassed. I mean, like, I'm trying to put myself in the mind frame of Cate Blanchett. So let me, like, do that for a couple seconds here. I
Okay.
feel like if I'm Cate Blanchett and I'm going to every award show and I keep seeing that clip over and over and over again, I would, by the final time we get to the Oscars and it's like, the screen is big and she's with people who have seen this clip over and over and over again with her, I'm sure there's like a little bit of like, oh, this again. I think maybe that's where the cringe more so comes from versus like, I don't like this performance or I don't like this movie. Like, we're never really gonna know. I don't think she's that kind of like actress who's like gone on record and said like, yeah, I didn't like that movie or I didn't like that performance.
Right.
I don't think we're ever gonna really know, but I feel like that's where more so the cringe came from, is like, oh my gosh, there I am on screen again, like hamming it up in this clip that I've seen like a gajillion times.
Right. I think that's probably right.
Yeah.
And I just think maybe she was embarrassed a little by the clip out of context.
Yeah, because it's big.
Is like, yeah, right. Because like in the context of the film, like it feels a little more, textual within what else is going on in the film. But like out of context, it's like, this woman is hamming it up like no one's business. Like, it's a lot.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Okay. Trojan Sailor said, is Kate's reaction to Marion winning possibly the best reaction of any losing Best Actress nominee ever? If not, who tops it?
I mean, I can't think of any off the top of my head, because I mean, of the meme and GIF legacy of the the reaction, and also like just again to restate, I am so impressed with how quickly she reacts. Like, they don't even get her full name out. She just hears Marion and she's like already like up and ready to cheer. Like, she has a faster reaction time than Marion Cotillard herself. So that's what I'm impressed by, her fast reaction time.
Yeah. As far as others, I'm not going to say this is the best reaction, but I'll just say I appreciate Glenn's reaction to losing for the wife because she clearly wanted it. She knew she was a front runner, and to have it snatched away again,
oh my God.
I just appreciate the honesty in her face in that moment. I'm just going to say that.
Yeah, it's like it's a combination of like the clench of the jaw is what really does it for me. And then also the fact that she's wearing gold. Like, she was dressed to win. Oh God. Yeah, that's sad. It's sad when like you can see someone dressed to win and then they don't.
Yep.
These are like war flashbacks for you.
Moving on from trauma. Well, we got this question from 4 different people, so I'll just combine it all here. Jonathan, Miles McHale, Ben Roberts, and Fritz. They all want to know, what other Best Actress performance do we want to see have a sequel, like Elizabeth?
Oh my gosh. I'm going to go Cate again, just to really fly my Cate flag high right now. What we should get, like, either a Carol sequel or a Carol prequel. Todd Haynes, get on that. It's never going to happen, but I'm just going to put it out there. Or like, we got a Tar sequel, and it's Lydia trying to climb her way back to the top into uncanceled territory, and she is trying to adapt her memoir Tar on Tar into a book or like into a movie. Movie. Yeah, so it's like a very like meta experience.
The layers.
I know.
I love it.
I know.
This
Todd
is
Field.
genius.
Yeah, here we go.
Yeah.
We're gonna get Oscar gold this time. Yeah.
Well, we talked about on the 2006 episode, we are getting a Devil Wears Prada sequel. So that is another possibility there. We'll see how that goes. I mean, I generally don't care much for sequels. Yeah. So this is tough. But my definitive answer here, and I've felt this for a decade now, is we need a sequel to The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo with Rooney Mara reprising her role.
Oh my gosh, yes. Okay, wait, Kevin, I know you're a Carol stan, so I need to ask this question to you. Would you have rather had Rooney Mara do a Girl with the Dragon Tattoo sequel then, or her do Carol.
Wow.
I think
That's
about
tough.
that all the time. I'm just like, wow. Because I love Rooney Mara and Girl with the Dragon Tattoo too.
I'm going to say I'm good that she did Carol right now. I'll say that because I
Yeah.
love her in that.
Yeah, me too.
So, yep.
Gosh.
But
Ugh,
that's tough. Wow.
yeah. That was my question for this episode.
That's a tough one. That's a
Yeah.
tough one. All right. Well, Eva Dane said, "This is the last time an actress would be nominated for playing Elizabeth I. Recast these past Elizabeth I actresses in this 2007 lineup. Bette Davis, Helen Mirren, Margot Robbie, Minnie Driver, and Judi Dench."
Okay, you can go because I have an attempt, but you go first.
Oh, no. Okay. All
Yeah.
right. Great. This was my bizarro stream of consciousness figuring this out.
Okay.
Bette Davis, I'm putting in La Vie en Rose.
Okay, me too. That's what I did too.
Yeah. Especially some of the older age Edith. I see some Bette Davis in there.
Yeah.
Helen Mirren in Away From Her.
Me too. Okay, great. We're matching so far.
Yeah. Judi Dench, I put in Elizabeth the Golden Age.
Okay. Yes, same wavelength. Mhm.
Wow. Okay.
Wow.
This is where it gets tough.
I know.
Because, like, who the hell am I going to put in Juno?
I know.
Between these two. I feel like Minnie Driver fits both of them, oddly enough.
Yeah.
I went with the Savages for Minnie Driver because she feels very Laura Linney to me as an actress.
Okay.
Margot Robbie, I am going to remove from the equation because I don't think she would fit any of these. All due respect, like Margot Robbie. I'm going to say someone who Eva didn't include, Glenda Jackson. Maybe I'll put her in the Savages and put Minnie Driver in Juno. And that's going to be my combination.
Okay. Well, I said Minnie Driver and Juno, and then I didn't really know what to do with Margot Robbie. So I just put her in the Savages because she's already there. So
why not?
Yeah.
It would be fun to see her in a role like that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Andrew Carden said, would Julie Christie have taken this if she hadn't previously won?
I honestly don't know. I would lean towards a no.
Yeah. Not to bring up more trauma for myself, but I will ask Andrew Carden, did Glenn Close win for The Wife? Just because Julie Christie would have been overdue doesn't mean she would have won. I think Marion still takes it.
Yeah, I would agree.
Yep. Amar said, is Julie Christie among the greatest losing performances ever?
Wow. I mean, I don't know. I'm just going to say yeah. But Kevin, the Oscar Best Actress expert.
400 performances later,
yes.
I'm going to say no. Not among the greatest ever
okay.
losing. That's like...
That's a very
There's a
bold
lot of
statement.
Performances I would put ahead of that,
mm-hmm.
but it's still a great performance. So, top 100. I don't know. Like, there's a lot of performances that are great that are nominated and lose.
That's true. She has tough competition.
Fritz said, did disappearing from her movie in the last part hurt Julie's chances the most?
Perhaps. I wonder if, like, can you, like, maybe compare that to like a Lily Gladstone in Killers of the Flower Moon.
Maybe. Yeah. Another SAG-winning performance,
Gosh. Yeah.
Yeah. It's fair. And I also think it's like a Sissy Spacek in The Bedroom who also disappeared in the final stage of that movie.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Perhaps.
I think that's a fair point, Fritz. Owen Daly said, what Oscar-nominated roles post her retirement would you have liked to see Julie Christie play? This is tough because, like, there's not a lot of older actresses who even get nominated, quite frankly, if it's not, like, Meryl Streep.
Yeah, I do remember, like, trying to look this up, but I couldn't think of any because of the point you just made, that there really aren't that many... Gosh, I don't know. Like Frances McDormand in Nomadland? I don't know if like a Julie Christie would be able to pull that off.
I mean, The Wife. Yeah. I keep bringing it back.
Would you let her take the fall instead of Glenn?
No. I'm happy that Glenn had that performance, and that kind of revived her career, I think, a little bit there.
Yeah.
I'm going to say put her in Philomena in place of Judi Dench.
Okay, I could see that.
That could be fun. Yeah, but it's tough. I would have loved, like, a Julie Christie in her prime doing something like really like The Lost Daughter, that kind of thing. I
Oh my
think
gosh,
that would
yeah,
be
that would have
really
been
fun.
really, really cool. Yeah.
Yeah. But it's, we don't nominate a lot of 70 plus actresses nowadays, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So Fritz wants us to rank Julie's nominated performances.
Okay. Oh gosh. Ooh. Okay, maybe I would put Away from Her at 1, 2, Darling, 3. What was it? Is it Miller and Mrs.
McCabe and Mrs.
McCabe
Miller.
and Mrs. Miller, and then 4. Not even 4. It's like it doesn't even get a number. It gets like, I don't know, a letter, a punctuation mark is Afterglow. Because...
a question mark.
Yeah, exactly, a question mark. Yeah.
Yes. I would actually put Darling number 1.
Okay.
I think that is a very unique performance.
That's such
that
a
I
cool
really
movie.
enjoy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I really like that
Love
movie.
that movie.
Yeah.
And a very, very close behind is Away from Her number 2.
Okay.
Both fantastic work. And yeah, number 3, McCabe and Mrs. Miller, and question mark Afterglow.
Yeah, perfect.
I like that. Okay, another one from Joey. Laura Linney coming from nowhere to get a nomination is iconic. What are some of your other favorite out of left field nominations in this category?
Oh my gosh. I mean, like, I don't know if it's like a favorite, but obviously the one that I'm thinking of is Andrea Riseborough to Leslie. Right. I don't know if that's necessarily like a favorite, like I just said, but just like the drama that ensued when that happened was like really quite the experience to live through. So
yeah.
Oh my gosh.
What a time to be on Twitter for that.
Yeah, I can't wait for your episode breaking down that year.
That is going to be
It's going to be drama.
Lot.
Yeah.
A lot to unpack.
You have like so many like historical events to like track.
I know.
That season.
It's going to be a long one, folks. Yeah. I would also add, Joey will enjoy this, Carol Kane and Hester Street, which Joey and I talked about in 1975. She had 0 other nominations leading up to that. And that fully came out of nowhere for a lot of people. So I always like that. So we got a lot of these questions in the similar vein of Wicco Tira said, can Laura Linney get her Oscar finally? Pool Shark said, will it ever be Laura Linney's time? Miles McHale said, Laura Linney is circling Glenn and Amy territory with 3 nominations and like 3 Emmys, but what will it take for her to get the Oscar? We love her.
Oh my gosh.
A lot of cheerleaders here.
Yeah, I mean, like, we should all be rooting for Laura Linney always. I think that just like really depends on the direction that she wants to go in with her career, because I feel like so many of just that idea for the longest time that there was like this hard line between like film and TV, like what makes, film actors stay on this side of the line and TV actors stay on this side of the line. But now, like, oh my gosh, you're seeing so many of the film actors and actresses crossing over the TV, and it's not really a big deal anymore. And honestly, like when I think of Laura Linney, like more recent Laura Linney, like I think of her more so in TV. I don't necessarily know if like, not to say obviously like movies don't matter and that the Oscars don't matter. I'm definitely not saying that, especially on this podcast. But what I am saying is that I think especially for actresses who are getting older and of a certain age, like we can see like historically, the Oscars don't really like tend to favor them to begin with. So I don't know. Like I think this just like really depends on like where she wants her career to go. If she wants to be still in like with the TV people or try to go, I don't know. Yeah, I would. That's my answer. I'll leave it at that.
Yeah. Well, now that she's off Ozark, she is doing more films again.
Okay.
Which is nice.
Yeah.
I could see her really sort of knocking it out of the park with like some really great Sundance indie and like getting back into it again. Like very easily could see that. I don't know what it'll take to actually win. Probably has to play like a real life historical figure at this rate. So
yeah, we need to think of someone real that she can play. Like I don't even know off the top of my head. A scientist. I don't know.
Yeah. So we'll see. Fingers crossed.
Yeah.
Okay. Marcel said, Elliot is the first transgender actor to be nominated, although before his transition. What do you think are the chances for him to get nominated again in Best Actor, thus being the first actor to have nominations in both actress and actor?
I think he can. I genuinely think like he can do it. They just
Yeah.
need to find like the right. Obviously, this applies to everyone, but he just needs to find the right movie and
Yeah.
maybe a Diablo Cody script
Wow.
again. That'd be really
Reunion.
cool.
Would
Yeah,
love to see it.
yeah.
Yeah. I think it's plausible. I mean, it's like the same thing I just said with Laura Linney, like a really great Sundance hit, and like he really knocks it out of the park. I think it could happen.
Mm-hmm.
He's in this movie that's releasing this year called Close to You that
Oh.
premiered at TIFF last year.
Okay.
And he got really good reviews for that. I don't know. But I
Okay.
think it just has to be the right combination of factors with like the studio and the type of movie. Like there's a lot of moving parts with this kind of thing.
Yeah.
So maybe it'll be an uphill battle because it's never happened for an openly trans actor before. But, you know, if anyone can do it, he's already in the club.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Okay. Well, this is a little bit of a tricky one, so we'll see what we say about this. Both Andy Bayless and Glorfindel of Gondolin want us to talk about our thoughts on whether there should be genderless categories
Oh my gosh.
at the Oscars.
Yeah, I saw that question too, and I was like, oof, that's a really difficult.
Yeah.
That's a really difficult one. I mean, I like the intention of trying to be inclusive
Yeah.
to gender non-binary people. I think the more
Mhm.
inclusive we can be, the better. However, I feel like then my follow-up question is like, is the category still going to be limited to 5, or do you open it to 10? Or because then it's like, if you kept hypothetically the number at 5, then is there like a quota as to like, okay, well, you need at least 2 women, 2 men, but then like that's not fair to gender non-binary people
Right.
too, if it's like, well, and you only have at least 1 spot. But then if you like don't have a quota, you could very much find yourself in a situation where it's like predominantly men, you know? So
Yeah.
it's tricky.
There isn't a solution that is going to solve everything.
Mhm.
I do support it in theory. I don't think the industry as it is right now is ready for that, unfortunately. And I don't think you're going to see the Oscars cutting down their acting categories. I will also just note that. You know, personally, of course, I don't want to lose Best Actress, but, you know,
Yeah.
it's tough. I think there's an argument to be made, like from Alex Newell, for example, when they won a Tony for Shucked, and Alex is gender nonconforming, and they decided to submit in featured actor at the Tonys because, like, the word actor is gender neutral, technically.
Okay.
And I think that's valid. I think eventually when we get more prominent, you know, non-binary performers delivering great performances, it would be really worth considering. I just don't know if we're quite there yet, but of course I do support making it more inclusive. So it's just a matter of like figuring out, because I don't want to do like 10 nominees in a category. I think that's so unwieldy.
Yeah.
Personally.
I can't imagine them breaking the tradition and history of the way the categories are structured after all this time. Like that just, I don't know.
Yeah, it's tough.
Yeah.
I think the only solution I've come up with is like, there is an argument where you could be like best lead dramatic performance, best lead comedic performance, supporting comedic performance, supporting dramatic performance, still have 5 nominees, still 4 categories, something like that.
Oh, okay. That's interesting.
But I don't know. It's just really tough.
Yeah.
Let's get to a few snub questions. So the Ghost of Glenda Miss Jackson If You Nasty said, this year had 4 Globe-nominated musical/musician biopic performances in contention between Cotillard, Helena Bonham Carter, Amy Adams, and Nikki Blonsky. Do you think any of these other ladies should be here, and who would win in a sing-off?
Oh my god. Wow. I have not thought of Hairspray, Nikki Blonsky in a really long time. Who were the people? It was Nikki Blonsky,
Amy Adams,
Amy
who
Adams.
was for Enchanted, Helena Bonham Carter, which was for Sweeney Todd, and I guess Marion Cotillard, even though she didn't technically sing herself.
Yeah,
but
so wouldn't she like already be last if she in the sing off?
yes, she's last. Sorry, Marion. You can be last. You can still keep the Oscar, but
Yeah.
you can be last here.
Yeah, I mean, in the end, you ultimately won.
Right.
Gosh, I don't know. Who would you rank at number 1 among them?
I would imagine like the vocal pipes of like Nikki Blonsky are probably technically the best, but I think Amy Adams would be my number 1.
Mhm.
I think she has a beautiful voice.
Yeah. Okay. Well, at least Amy Adams will win something here.
Helena
Yeah.
Bonham Carter is a little shaky. Sorry.
So she's like ahead
Third.
of third, and then 2 would
Yeah.
be
Nikki
Nikki
Blonsky.
Blonsky. Okay, yeah, cool.
Shout out Nikki Blonsky wherever you are,
Yeah,
girl. We
yeah.
support you,
Mhm.
and we want your comeback.
Yes, please. Maybe that should be the
Yes.
sequel. That should be the sequel that we're searching
Hairspray 2?
for. Yeah. Hairspray 2.
What are they gonna do now? Kick it in the 70s? Like,
I don't-
what's the vibe?
I don't know, I guess.
All right. John T said, in the 5 Wide Field era, it was pretty rare for a Best Picture nominee to have a lead actress performance and not get a Best Actress nom. Why did Keira Knightley miss here for Atonement 2 years after she'd broken through with Oscar?
Oh, yeah, that's a really good question because Atonement did
Very well.
very well. And I actually like between the 3 Knightley Joe Wright collaborations, Atonement is my favorite of the 3.
Love it.
Gosh, why did she not show up? I wonder if it's more so like people thought like, oh, she'll show up again because she was so young already to begin with.
True.
Maybe.
Yeah.
I'll just throw
And
that
such
out
a
there.
similar feeling period piece kind of situation from Pride and Prejudice.
Yeah.
Maybe it felt like not much of a stretch.
Mhm.
Perhaps. I don't know.
Mhm.
I also think the Bryony character is so much the focus of Atonement that like maybe
gosh, Bryony.
she just overshadowed everything. And that's why Saoirse got her nomination.
Yeah. Wow. Oh my gosh, Bryony,
Tune in
that character.
next season for a whole lot of Saoirse Ronan.
Oh yeah, I'm excited for that.
That'll
And
be fun.
perfect lead up to what is it? Blitz? Is that the
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
very topical?
Very exciting. Yes. Chanchi Telez says, who came in 6th? I think this is pretty confidently, I'm going to say Angelina Jolie in A Mighty Heart.
Okay, yeah, because she was in a
Who
lot of the
got
precursors,
SAG
right?
nomination, Globe nomination, Critics nomination, and Laura Linney kind of took her spot, quote unquote.
Yeah, I would agree. Yeah, I would say probably Angelina Jolie or maybe Keira Knightley would be the 7th. Yeah, but
Yeah,
yeah,
makes
6th,
sense.
Angelina Jolie for sure. Mhm.
Yeah. Chels said, obligatory Survivor questions.
Oh, this
Who
is you.
wins? Okay. Dominates challenges, best social game, all the same questions we get every week. Well, not a very athletic group this week.
Yeah, does
I
it
will
like
say.
technically like wouldn't Elizabeth, I feel like just by nature of being a queen, kind of
Yeah. She wouldn't even be cast, first of all.
She would send
'cause she's the
send
queen.
Lady in Waiting, what's her name? Bess out into the
Bess.
field
Yes.
to do all of her dirty
I'm sending
work for
my
her.
favorite.
Yeah.
Yes. I think Juno does pretty well with this group. I'll say that. I think Elizabeth, if she is there, is way too temperamental to do well. Wendy Savage, I'm picturing a breakdown, sadly.
Mhm.
Sorry, Wendy.
Yeah.
Fiona,
I mean, I don't know.
I don't know if she passes the medical test.
Maybe if there was
Given
like
her
a
condition.
cross-country skiing challenge.
That's true. That's true. Good call.
Yeah.
Edith Piaf, I mean, depends on what point in her life we're picking Edith Piaf, because like not looking great by the end of that movie.
Yeah, that's true. That is really, really
I
true.
also think she would get in fights with people as well because she would be off her medication.
She'd be
So that would
fighting
be tough.
with Wendy Savage.
Yes, and it would be ugly. Yeah. So I think Juno pretty easily wins with this group.
Yeah, maybe it's like the
and
sympathy.
I would love to align with her.
Yeah, it's like the
Yeah.
sympathy though, because it's like, oh, she's a pregnant girl. Like
Yeah.
we can't do this.
Such
to
a
her.
great story.
Mhm,
Yeah.
mhm.
And I think she would be great to have on other reality franchises. That was the other question too.
Oh, she totally has a personality for reality TV.
Yes.
Maybe she could
I
be
can
in the
picture a
first
lot of
season
good
of like,
confessionals.
yeah, she could be in the first season of like Teen Mom.
That's true.
Yeah.
That applies. All right, one last one from Joey. Recast these 2000s Oscar talents and Karen Black in the roles above. Karen Black, Amy Ryan, excuse me, Halle Berry, Julie Walters, Renee Zellweger.
Mm.
Oof.
I said like Renee Juno,
I also said that. Yes.
and then I forgot to fill out the rest, so I'll just listen to you.
Okay, great. Good start.
Yeah.
Good start.
Teamwork.
Julie Walters in Elizabeth the Golden Age.
Okay, yes, I could see that.
I said, Amy Ryan makes a lot of sense for the Savages,
Yeah.
but I'm going to slot in Halle Berry. I want to see her do a role like that. I think that would be really fun.
That would be really cool.
And I can't really see her in some of these others, so that makes sense. Karen Black, I'm going to put in Away From Her. And Amy Ryan, I'm throwing you in La Vie en Rose and seeing what happens.
Oh my God. Wow, that'd be quite the different movie. But
Yes,
here for that.
absolutely. All right. Well, we're finally at our final segment where we will reveal who we think was the runner-up of this Best Actress race. Steffi, I think we've kind of been talking about it a lot, but who do you think was our runner-up to Marion?
For sure, it was Julie Christie all the way.
Yeah, no question. She had a lot in her favor. The SAG win, the Golden Globe win, Critics' Choice win, a lot of sentiment behind her, excitement that she was back. Very sympathetic role. I think Elliot Page may have gotten a fair amount of votes as well, but I don't think there was anyone else who possibly could have been the runner-up this year. So very clear cut this year, I think.
Yeah, I would agree, because I feel like too, kind of like what you said earlier, if you were going to give Juno something, it would have been for screenplay. And as much as we love the screenplay for Away From Her, the performance really is, key to that. So yeah, I would say for sure Julie Christie. And like I think too, like kind of what we've been saying, like even from the very beginning, it's like, just I think it really boils down to like performance style. It's like, do you want the more showy performance or something a little bit more subtle? You have to really lean in to see what's going on, and I think the Academy tends to skew showier.
Yes, they do.
Yeah.
Well, who would you have voted for from this lineup?
Marion. Yeah, Marion Cotillard for sure.
Yeah, I agree. I would have voted for Marion Cotillard. And I mean, like I said, I was rooting for her at the time, and nothing has changed all these years later. So it's a fantastic win, very inspired, and I'm just very glad it happened for her. And she really shot out of a cannon after this, and she was in so many different Hollywood movies around this time. Again, not all of them worked, but she has been such a fascinating actress to watch, 15 years after this win. So I'm just really happy that this happened.
Yeah, me too, because it was definitely deserved.
But Julie Christie is fantastic. Easy number 2. But it's Marion for me.
It was definitely deserved. And at least like for Julie Christie, her last nomination was like, or a last nomination to date. We don't know. But it's like, it's a solid one. Imagine if she ended with Afterglow. My God. Oof. That's scary. Chilling. Oh no.
Don't even want to think about it.
Yeah.
Yep. So that's a victory for both of them in that respect. So there you go. Okay, well, Steffi, this was so much fun. So glad I had you on the show.
Oh, good. I'm so happy I got to be on your show. I've been a fan for quite some time, and I have so much respect for this journey that you have been on, because it's like literal Oscar history that you are doing. I'm sure like maybe other people have done the Best Actress deep dive, but I mean the fact that you have, made a show and had so many different conversations about all of these performances, it's like really incredible work. So I'm happy to be part of this show in any way that I can. And thank you, life. Thank you, love. I too can command the win, sir. So yeah, wow. I just combined like everything.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Now I'm just waiting for you to say you're pregnant.
I know. I'm just gonna do like a medley of the performances now. This is my ultimate lip sync.
Big red pillow.
Yes.
Okay. Yes, this was a lot of fun. And where could people find more of your work on the internet?
Yes, you can find me on social media. I'm at INN_MHO on Twitter /X, Instagram, Letterboxd, and you can find me on YouTube, in my humble opinion. And then if you are interested in other podcasts, I co-host a podcast called Diva Dailies, where we talk a bunch about different divas on film, TV, and in music. We're Diva Dailies podcast wherever you listen to your podcasts. So yeah.
Excellent. All right. Well, thank you all so much for listening. You can find me on all platforms at Kevin_Jacobson. The show's at Oscar Runner Up on Twitter, Instagram, and The Runner Up is. Rate, review, and subscribe if you haven't already. And if you like what you heard, go to patreon.com/andtherunnerup is, where you can hear a whole bunch of bonus episodes. And next week, we'll be breaking down the Best Actress lineup of 2008, where the nominees were Anne Hathaway in Rachel Getting Married, Angelina Jolie in Changeling, Melissa Leo in Frozen River, Meryl Streep in Doubt, and Kate Winslet in The Reader, with the winner being Kate Winslet. It's finally her time. So with that, thanks again, Steffi.
Thank you so much for having me.
And I will bid you all adieu.